Hey, we're live.
Hey, now that you're live, you're no longer ready.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. Was I really ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Ready or
What am
not.
I doing on here? Hey, everybody. We're going to wait for a few people to file in. While we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screens for you to look at some pretty pictures because we love pretty pictures here on the stream. And we're just going to play the VFX Apprentice demo reel here for you. This is a collection of works that have come out of us. So, yes, we are excited to be here with Jonathan Williamson. Hey, Jonathan.
Hello, hello.
Jonathan is a few things. You are many things, among which you're the co-founder of CG Cookie and Autotroph.
Mm-hmm.
Am
Mm-hmm.
I getting that right? In
That's
that
right.
order?
Yeah, and
Awesome.
included in that is also Superhive, formerly Blender Market.
Very cool. And I'm Jason Kaiser, founder of VFX Apprentice, which y'all might know if you're familiar with the channel. If you're new to the channel, welcome. It's great to have you here. We're going to have a good time today. We're going to talk about all things online education in the digital art space as
I
much
think
as
it'll be
we
fun.
can, as much as we know about,
Yeah.
we'll be able to share. So,
So
yeah. Were you
hopefully
going
we
to
have
say
a
something?
few things to share.
Yes. So, like I said, the stream is still like kicking off. There's a bit of a delay the way that it streams for us. So, like, okay, I can see it now. I'm going to mute myself because that's super weird to hear myself twice. But yeah, so as you're filing in here, I guess we can just start. I wanted to give a little bit of background from each of us. Maybe I'll let you start, Jonathan, since you're the guest of honor today. You tell
Guest
just
of
a
honor.
little bit
Sounds so
about
formal.
yourself, and then after you've done that, I'll share a little bit about my background, and
Yeah.
then we can dive into um, the questions. We've got questions, and please leave
Yeah.
questions in the chat. And there's also some questions that we got beforehand
That sounds great.
from y'all.
Well, yeah. So my name is Jonathan Williamson. I am the co-founder of a couple of different sites. The main one that's relevant for this discussion is CG Cookie. So CG Cookie is a 3D education platform for learning Blender. We got started back in 2008 is when my partner and I first kind of started working together. My business partner is Wes Burke, and we really kind of kicked it off in 2009 and 2010. And originally at that point, it was a general purpose CG site, tutorials, articles, interviews, you name it. And it was completely software agnostic. Um, I at the time was a Blender artist. I'd started using Blender in 2003, actually, and way back when now. And there wasn't a lot of free tutorials, well, frankly, for any software, but definitely not for Blender at that point. And so I started dabbling in a few tutorials, teaching people how to do modeling, and that was always kind of my focus was modeling. And it just kind of exploded from there. It's definitely a right place, right time scenario where there was so little content out there that people were really hungry for it. Um, but so CG Cookie today is 100% focused on Blender. We used to teach anything and everything. Now it's exclusively Blender. And I suppose occasionally we teach other things as long as they're adjacent to a Blender pipeline. You know, we might use Photoshop or Substance or something like that in a tutorial because the outcome then is a Blender work. But Blender is our bread and butter. So that's the education side is CG Cookie. And then in 2014, we started Blender Market, which is now known as Superhive. And that's the commercial marketplace for selling Blender add-ons, assets, you name it. And that's my primary focus today is really doing most of my work on that. And then broadly as a whole, our company is Autotroph. So we have the company, which is Autotroph, and then underneath Autotroph, we have CG Cookie, Superhive, and another one called Orange Turbine. And it gets a little complicated. There's a lot of moving pieces, but that's the gist. So yeah, been doing Blender and 3D in some form or fashion for 23 years now. Although I've done a lot less active 3D work in the last 5 years than all the other years combined. But that's okay. I'm pretty busy running the business now.
Nice.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll pass back to you, Jason.
And yeah, thank you for that intro. And I see Pierre in the chat I hope he
Hi,
doesn't mind
Bjork.
me calling him out. Hey, Pierre, from P2 Design. Pierre introduced us.
He
He knew
did.
you and he knew me, and
Bjork
he,
and I don't know how, Bjork, you may know better than I do. I don't know how far back we go, but I know like we had been working on some tutorials together, and I think you had done some of my early tutorials like way back when, and
yeah,
then you went and got really, 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 really good and went on and did your own thing.
that
Uh,
happens. You teach
Indeed.
people and then they pass you up.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've long
So,
since not been the master at anything.
yep, yep. So basically, yeah, I mean, that intro is fantastic. So I'll give a quick intro as well on myself. So I'm Jason, and I've been working in some form of animation since like 2007. While I was in school, I was working on odd projects here and there. Ended up finding my way over to Riot Games. I was there from when was it? 2014 to 2020, and had a great time working on the League of Legends team and some R&D teams. And then came to work for myself. I guess I launched VFX Apprentice while I was still working at Riot. So I was doing teaching and training, traveling to conferences and schools and stuff. And I really have had a love for that
You
forever.
mentioned 2020 was that COVID related when you left Riot?
Yeah, it just happened to match up with my grand plan because we had launched VFX Apprentice as a formal website in fall of 2020 or 2019. So around the time that COVID was actually breaking out, we didn't know about it yet. I launched VFX Apprentice.
Your timing was pretty good.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it was already in motion, and then like it was looking viable as a
Mhm.
full-time thing that I could just focus on. And I told Riot, I said, look, guys, you guys have been amazing. I love this. This has been my dream job, but this is my dream business, and I'm going to chase it and I'm going to go for it. And they
What what was your role at
fully
Riot?
supported that. I was a senior VFX artist when I
Okay.
left. Hmm. Yeah. So when I started at Riot, I was like a 2D effects concept artist for a few months.
Uh-huh.
And then I switched to being a 3D VFX artist. And then I was a senior VFX artist. So
What size was that team that you were working in?
the League of Legends team
Yeah.
is quite large. At the time, I think there was a range somewhere in the like 100 and some odd, and eventually made it up to somewhere around 200, I think. Depends on how you count it, because there's
Yeah.
a lot of like support outside the studio as well that helps with various things. So
I would
yeah,
imagine that going from a large team like that to starting your own thing was quite a transition.
yes, yes, I'm a social person and I've been very lonely.
Oh.
It's very hard running a business on your own when you're a social person,
Uh,
which is why we met. Actually, why I was talking with Pierre in the first place. I'm like,
is it really?
I need new community. I need other people that are like out there running a business, like trying to do this online thing,
Yeah.
because there's a
Well, in the VFX space,
similar
there's really
experience.
not that many. If you exclude all the production houses, there's actually not that many online VFX businesses of any form.
Yeah,
Not
I
compared to a
mean,
lot of industries, anyway.
yeah, and we're gonna get into that. We're
Yeah.
gonna get into like the needs in the industry. I know a lot of the questions that came in are about like career pathways and how to get in, and this is obviously something I'm super passionate about. I know you are too.
Yeah.
Um,
Literally built our businesses around it.
yeah, exactly. I hope we're passionate about it. Otherwise, we've made a huge mistake. I still wonder if I made a huge mistake, even though I'm passionate about it. It's very
Let's
common.
see. Business is now 15 plus years in, and I still wonder that some days. Not most
Yeah.
days, but some days.
And that's been great too. For the couple years we've known each other, that I've been able to like lean on you for perspective. Because me, I'm like 5 or 6 years in, right? Depending on if you count when I left Riot or when I launched the school. And it's nice talking with someone who's like, oh, yeah, that was fine. That's
But
what a
it,
line of
it, it
credit is
goes it
for.
goes
You're
both
fine.
ways though too,
It's like,
because
oh, geez.
sometimes I feel like I've been in it long enough now that I might be jaded when I don't realize it, and having a fresher perspective is really nice.
Yeah.
Like, what was the thing we were talking about the other day? I don't mind sharing this. I was asking you about
Go
our
for it.
story and our narrative for Autotroph, I think it was, and I think I asked you something to the effect of, "Is it worth me writing about myself and ourself as the company?" And you said in no uncertain terms, "Yes, yes, it is."
I feel like
Uh,
being too humble sometimes makes you feel like an odd duck in a cutthroat business world
yeah,
where people are so bent on like promoting themselves and selling themselves out to like make money. And it's like, well, okay, but also like sometimes your customers just actually want to get to know you better. And sometimes your customers actually really love joining you for the story.
yeah.
And they'll tell you if they don't like something.
Well, and I think you said it well in our the phone call that we were having at the time. You mentioned something like, "Look, at the end of the day, people like connection."
Yeah,
Heck, look at what we're doing right now on the live stream with live viewers. That it's we're all looking for connection.
absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
why
We're
we're
trying to
here.
connect. Yep,
So
100%. So, yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for all of this. I think it's been a long time in the works. We started talking about getting on. I want to do more live streams like this with other people with other perspectives. I just really enjoy it. But
they're
you
really
and
a
I,
lot of
yeah,
fun. It's funny too because like it's one of those that it always seems like when you're planning on doing a one in the future before you've actually done it. It always seems like,
hmm
oh, it's going to be so much work. There's so much prep that goes into it and coordination, and it seems so daunting. And then you get into it, and you're just like, it wasn't that much. You know,
no,
it
yeah,
can. The best ones are low key and they're real. They're candid. If it's a big old performance and it's all scripted, kind of miss the point.
yeah, exactly. I mean, this is just meant to be a very casual time to just chill out with. What have we got? 34 people watching? That's a good
Granted, we
size.
say this as we are the host and co-host sitting here, so hopefully it's worth it for everybody else that's not on the host.
Well, about those individuals watching, thanks for tuning in. I mean, if you want to just set this on off to the side while you're doing something else, that's awesome. Like, I love doing that with podcasts myself. This is going to be a little more podcast style where we're just kind of chatting, answering
Mhm.
questions. If you have questions, please leave them in the chat. We'll get to you. I mean, with a room size like this and the time that we have, we're more than likely going to be able to get to everyone. If we know an answer to your question, great, right? We're going to make sure we answer it. At some point, I might leave the reel running. I don't know if you find it distracting, Jonathan. We can leave it on
Doesn't bother me.
or off or whatever you want. If in the chat you're like, I want to see just the two of you, and we can let the video stop, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we can dive into some of the questions that people wrote in on first.
Let's do it. I'll
And
let you take your pick.
great. Okay. So we'll just take it from the top in the order in which they were received. So um, we have a question here about cultural aesthetics from, I hope I'm saying this right, Aderbal Andrade. I don't know. They're from Brazil, but they say they're a teacher over there, and they're trying to promote local stories and cultural aesthetics. And then the follow up question on that was, can focusing on some of these aesthetics help counter some of the influence we're seeing from AI generated content? We're getting right into AI from the beginning.
Oh
Everyone
yeah,
else is talking about it. Why not, right?
it's inevitable.
But the question was about AI. It was basically, you know, can this help counter some of the lack of originality that we're seeing from AI generated content? I think something that I'm noticing, and I can only speak from my own experience because I'm just one pair of eyes observing what's happening with AI right now. A lot of the content that's coming out of AI is really aimed at getting the clicks. It's aimed at getting the mass audience. It's aimed at getting um, the broad things, and that's probably just because that's what most people see coming up as the broad stuff. There is some more niche AI content. I do know a couple of AI researchers that are just tinkering around with some really wild, out there stuff, but it's similar with any media, that like certain media will be aimed towards a more mass audience because it's like highly polished and has themes that a lot of people really like. And other media may not be as polished. It may not look as good. It might be poorly executed. And it might be about something that doesn't resonate with a larger audience. I think your question about adding in unique aesthetics, whether it's cultural or otherwise, I mean, it really comes down to that, right? Like, is it going to be something a lot of people like? Is it going to be high quality and well done, well executed? Um, a lot of the AI we're seeing is trained on really well done, well refined original works. And then that makes the AI look better. It makes it look more refined. But if you were to train the AI using less refined works that were not highly polished, it would reflect that. So um, it's all about where you aim the canon, I would
Yeah.
say.
Well, and I think it's also it's what are you going for? For example, if you're trying to make training with mass appeal that has a worldwide audience that can reach people all over the place at all different skill levels, you're going to have to kind of meet everything in the middle, whether that's the aesthetic, the cultural references, you name it. If you're creating something more for yourself, then you can go as far as you want with the local references in particular. I think all of the individual cultural aesthetics, that's what makes your own work unique. So I would just consider who's your audience. At the end of the day, no matter what you're doing, if you're doing professional work that you have some level of autonomy over, you're always going to be balancing making the thing for the audience and making the thing for yourself. And I think there's probably a good reason that many people that are professional artists in any form, their personal work does not necessarily overlap that much with the work that they do commercially, because you've got to know what your audience is. And I would argue that knowing your audience is probably the more important thing. Um,
Yep.
hmm.
Any art form
And it's
is
hard.
communication with someone receiving it.
Yeah. And if you can
Whether
build an audience for your own local aesthetic with local stories and cultural influence, more power to you. That's awesome.
100%.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. I think, you know, it's it's a little bit like learning how to draw. Like you learn how to draw well not so that you can sell pencil drawings. It's so that you can go on to be great at any other form of visual art,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's painting, digital art, 3D art, animation,
We actually
VFX,
have a question
whatever.
about that later on.
Oh,
Uh,
we can jump ahead. I didn't know I segued into one.
yeah, you did. Let me look at the list. It was where did it go?
You look for that. I was going to
I'll find it.
say,
Yeah, yeah,
I'll close the thought here because I was going to say, like, AI, whether you love it or hate it, whether it's a legitimate tool that respects copyright or it totally violates copyright infringement, it's a tool to create media, right? Just like so many other tools. The thing is, if you're not great at controlling and art directing what you're doing, then you're going to struggle using AI or not to make something that feels resonant and compelling and fresh and original. And then how do I explain AI slop? I don't know. AI slop sometimes just hits
yeah.
and people love it and it resonates. And I
Yeah.
guess I don't know. We're not, I think, I think there will always be a hunger though. AI slop aside, there will always be a hunger for art that resonates, that tells a story, that hits all the feels and evokes, all the positive things, beauty, excitement, power, passion, love, joy, all the things that we turn to media to feel. Those are evoked by talented people who understand how to take the viewer on that journey. And so learning the basics of how to do that, I mean, that's everything.
Yeah. Well, so that was kind of the question. This was one from Andrew Dunn or Andrew Dune,
Hmm.
and he asked that CG Cookie started out as software agnostic before switching to Blender, a multi-tool graphics software, and VFX Apprentice teaches VFX skills and implementation across multiple game engines. Through personal experience and online surveys, I noticed that beginner 3D artists struggle to learn even the basics of a single software, much less the many software required to make the nice 3D art and visual effects that they want. Most beginner tutorials are super software specific as well. And on the other hand, crafts like drawing and painting have canonical books, courses, and other resources that students can then learn to use the craft regardless of what pencils or paints the student is using. And here's the question: is there room for similar kinds of resources for 3D game art, or is game art still too software dependent? This is actually probably my favorite question that we've had over the years on CG Cookie. This is a timeless question in the context of software, I think,
Hmm.
and it is also the thing that just about led me to burn out on software or on 3D creation in general.
Keeping up with the churn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's keeping up with the change, but it's this constant challenge within the educational space, and I'm going to get back to actually answer that question from my perspective at least. But brief segue is there's this constant challenge in the education world where, to no fault of their own, students have this strong need seemingly to feel like they have to use the most recent version of the software, and that if they're not using the most current version, then they're missing out, they're learning old techniques, that everything they're learning is going to be invalid. In the Blender space in particular, this is really hard because there's a new version of Blender every 2 months. Like, not even kidding, it's every 2 months, and it has been for like 15 years. And so by the time you can produce a course and release it, you have people saying it's already outdated. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not outdated yet.
Yep.
um, so, to go back to the question of, is there room for similar kinds of resources for 3D game art or game art that where you have more canonical work that's not so focused on the software? And I would say absolutely yes. Making it is a lot harder. Focusing on fundamentals and underlying art principles, whether that is lighting, shading, silhouette, you name it, whatever this
Hmm.
fundamentals are, those are timeless things. you know the same things that we use when sculpting clay apply to sculpting digital models. The same techniques for shading with pencils apply to lighting a scene. At the end of the day, you are trying to convey something visually, and those fundamentals will always apply, regardless of whether you're using a 3D tool like Blender or Maya or Max or a pencil or clay. They all apply.
I think it's challenging for me because it's like I enjoy making art
Mhm.
and I need to make money.
Yes.
So I enjoy making art. I need to make money.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's like, what skills do I need to make the money? But then also, what skills do I enjoy learning to make the art? And then what's the Venn diagram where they overlap? And I think everyone is so different. And, every instructor is so different. And you hear all these perspectives. Something I always try to really keep in mind is I have two eyeballs and that's it. I can only see from one position, from one life experience, and that's it. And so people will ask, like, what do I learn from? What is there available? How do I learn this thing called game art? And I'm like, well, probably the reason why the resources are so scattered is because the games are so scattered. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a beautiful thing. It's kind of like, I want to learn how to write. Okay, great. Good for you. What do you want to write? Fiction or nonfiction? Do you want to write within fiction or nonfiction? What category do you want? Do you want historics? Do you want self help? Do you want how to? Do you want, this is all just nonfiction. And then in fiction, you've got
Hmm.
fantasy, sci fi, different styles of fantasy or sci fi. You've got, slice of life. You've got romance. You've got drama. You've got action, all these things. And that's just words on a page, but there's so many different ways to approach it, to learn the basics of it, even the basics of a specific genre might be very different than the basics of another genre.
Yeah.
There's some
Although,
overlap
but I
for
would
sure.
also argue though that so
Hmm.
many of the underlying fundamentals apply across those genres. Whether you're talking creative writing, visual effects,
Yep.
cinematography, you name it. Um, there's always going to be the underlying principles that are, for all intents and purposes, timeless, and the software is just the tool of the moment that we're using and learning to apply those
Yeah.
things and to convey them.
So bringing that into game art, I would say that. I would say if you want to be a game artist, drawing always helps. It always helps everything every time. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Jonathan.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So drawing to me
I have another one
is
that I'll add to that once you're done.
literacy. So like when you're learning to write, you need to learn language, how to form sentences, and then beyond forming sentences, how to form like coherent ideas, descriptive writing, and that kind of thing to like adequately convey what's in your head through writing. And
Yeah.
drawing is that for visual
And
art.
writing's the one that I'd like to do more of. I'd like to go back and take some creative writing classes. I've never done it. I'd love to. I would say beyond drawing too, though, is the other one that is so beneficial, particularly in the context of games, and that's traditional sculpting. Like literally
Hmm.
working with clay or working with other, physical material to create a three-dimensional object. It's such a good exercise to understand form and function in this case. I remember one of the most compelling classes I ever took that really made an impact on my 3D modeling when I was doing it actively was I took a class from Andrew Karse with Anatomy Tools. He still runs Anatomy Tools, I believe, at anatomytools.com. He does traditional clay sculpting for anatomy. And so you have it's live figure modeling. You've got a live model, and you're sculpting in clay for like 5 straight days, 8 hours a day, and
Hmm.
learning anatomy hands on through clay. And it was relevant for me at the time because I was doing a lot of character modeling. I was doing a lot of anatomy focused work, but the lessons to then like learning how light travels over a surface. It's so easy to see it in person, and then but to then convey it digitally is much harder. And learning how that works in the real world just made it so much easier to convey with a digital sculpt. And that
That's
applies
cool.
to any 3D thing, just being able to visualize how does this actually work and transfer in space is super helpful.
Now I want to take a sculpting class.
You should. It's great fun.
Go figure out what's happening around me nearby.
Oh, I'm sure there's some good ones. um,
Um, that's cool. That's really cool. Okay, so I really like that. I hope that helps. I mean, yeah, there are resources at the beginner level. I think when you start getting more specific about what you want to do, the kind of
mhm.
studio you want to work for, the kind of style you want to work in, yeah, the tooling can vary, and even the stylistic considerations can vary. And so it's always so case by case. I'm always answering people on a very specific. I have more follow up questions than I have answers usually, and
I
then
think
just a very simple answer of, oh, then just do this class, just do that thing, go over there, because that's
I
what you
think it's
need.
probably worth adding that, one of the things that's hard, particularly for us, and I'm assuming this is the case for you, Jason, with VFX Apprentice, but it's definitely been the case with CG Cookie, where, there's a strong desire to teach art fundamentals as a part of our courses. But that kind of gets back to the same challenge of, if we have to keep this content constantly updated, like take for example, we do a Blender basics course, so it's just the
Hmm.
basics of Blender, how to navigate in 3D space, how to add objects to a scene, like the raw basics.
Hmm.
That's not the right context for how to teach fundamentals of art.
Hmm.
But we've now made that course 7 different times. We just released the 7th generation of that course because it just to keep it updated with the software. I think it's worth anybody that is trying to get into 3D, VFX, etc. If you're at the beginner level, maybe even consider separating those learning tracks of like, all right, I'm going to learn the art fundamentals. And you can learn that wherever you go, whether you're going to school for it, you're learning online, like very intentionally focus on the art side
Yeah.
and then learn the software and let the software be the software. Because then suddenly you'll find yourself able to apply these concepts from the art world so much more easily. Uh, hmm.
I
like
totally
I
agree.
actually I remember one of my most embarrassing learning experiences so I was 13, and the thing that I wanted to do more than anything else when I was learning Blender is I wanted to make chrome. I wanted to make shiny things for whatever reason. I don't know what I was making, but I wanted everything to be chrome.
It's good to have a
This was
goal.
yeah, it was fun. But I did not understand that chrome is mostly just a reflective surface. And so I kept making all these things with just like a gray world with nothing to reflect. And then was super confused like, why are they not chrome? Why are they not shiny? Because I didn't understand the fundamentals of what shininess is, what chrome is. It sounds so silly in hindsight, but it was one of those like, if I knew that it was just a highly reflective surface,
Yeah.
oh, I need an environment. I missed the whole environment part.
Yeah. It's like it's just blank.
It's just blank.
It's there's nothing reflecting because there's
Yeah,
nothing around it.
there's nothing to reflect.
That's funny.
uh,
And your earlier comment kind of segued as well too, because you mentioned like, well, developing artistic fundamentals. I mean, we went ahead and did that. So something that we kept running into was people were coming in trying to learn effects without having a full exposure to all the
yeah,
basics of what would be needed to make effects for games. And so actually in the description, I mean, for anyone who's interested in following up with either of the two schools that we represent, there's things to get started. We're trying something just with this stream. There's a 7-day free trial. It's not something we've ever done before. We're just doing it just for the stream today. So if you're interested in signing up for a free 7 days of VFX Apprentice, you're welcome to click there. We have fundamentals of timing, fundamentals of even drawing basics, and how to get from the basic. Because when we first launched, we didn't have basic content at all. We had more intermediate and up content, and we kept getting feedback from people like, come on, help me out, because I feel like you're throwing me in the deep end here when I sign up. And so over the past couple of years, we've really fleshed out our
nice.
beginner pipeline, which to your point is extremely timeless content that I don't know that we'll ever have to update it. I mean, maybe some minor modifications
Well,
over
and
the
yours
years.
is your focus is well so much more focused than ours, where you are
Hmm.
teaching visual effects for games.
Hmm.
Parts of me wishes that mine was so much more focused. It's like we teach Blender. Well, what do
I
you
don't,
teach in Blender? What you can do anything in Blender.
of all the disciplines for games, VFX might be the most diverse and hardest to focus.
I can
So I appreciate you
believe
saying
that.
that it's focused, but I'm thinking over here, I'm like, I mean, we have a follow up
It's all
question from
relative.
Pierrick because that actually segues into this because Pierrick's like, how do you come up with fresh content years
Yeah.
into having a school? How do you stay inspired and keep the fuel to make more stuff? And I'm just like, man, 5 years in, I don't feel like we're even close to finished with all the content that's needed to
Hmm.
fully train an effects artist. I mean, our effects artists get jobs all the time just because there is no training for us. Like there's not enough.
Yeah.
So studios end up
Well, and
taking
I
on the
would
burden
imagine
of
that
training
training
people.
is constantly changing. The needs are constantly changing, just as pipelines develop and game engines
Yeah.
progress. And
I mean, it's
although
it's wild out
to
there.
the other half of Purick's question, though, like how do you find fuel and the inspiration to go on? You and I have talked about that pretty well at length
Yeah.
privately of, you know, balancing burnout and not feeling inspired about our work or what to do or whatnot. Um,
100%.
so I would be very curious to hear, how your perspective on that has changed over the years. I know for me, Pyrrhic probably knows this because when he and I were working together more closely, I was still actively teaching, and I don't teach anymore. Um, so my
Hmm.
short answer for Pyrrhic's question is have a team so that they can pick up the slack when you fall on your face.
Yeah.
Because I fell on my face a couple of times and just ran out of steam, and I couldn't do it. Uh,
Surrounding myself with people has been critical through this whole process. I mentioned earlier that leaving Riot was a very lonely transition for me because I didn't realize how social I was until I wasn't going into a studio every day. And I know a lot of people went through some version of this with COVID where suddenly they felt very isolated.
Hmm.
And a lot of us haven't recovered totally since then. More some of us that are more extroverted. I don't know. Maybe the introverts are doing okay, but
I did
maybe
all
the
right in
extroverts.
COVID.
Well, extroverts like kind of we just barge in and just make our social connections. Introverts are I think it can be struggle for introverts too, actually,
Yeah.
because there's fewer uh, automatic social connections there. But
Yeah.
point being, so much of my motivation comes from other people. Literally, like my team is amazing. We are small but mighty. Like a couple of them are helping out. You see Benedict Furlings there in the chat. He's been with us from the beginning, basically started as a student and then early on had some great ideas of how to like improve and help the company grow. And I was like, you sound like the exact kind of person I want to work with. Come, I'll pay you and you can help me implement some of these ideas you're having. And he's grown to help in so many capacities. We've got Anna also running the official chat. Thank you, Anna, for doing that. Anna's been amazing with like on the marketing side and content production side. And I've got others. Like I feel bad like trying to name everyone, but like sometimes I'll just like ping someone. I'll be like, "Hey, are you available for some body doubling?" For those who don't know what body doubling is, it's for if you have like ADHD, it can help just having someone else working alongside you or like with you in tandem, and you're more productive. You get more done. So I've done that. I'll just get someone on a call. I'm like, can we just do a work call where we just get shit done? Like, I just need to
Yeah.
get stuff done. Can you sit with me in a call while I kind of talk through it? I will pay you for your time to just humor me. Do you have an hour? And I feel silly, but like honestly, I've worked from home. I don't have an office space outside of my home. I only meet and run into people at like conferences and coffee. And that's it,
Hmm.
And so yeah, that's been one way that I help with my motivation. Obviously, that's not a foolproof plan.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I
It's,
do what I
it's
can.
I'm similar in that way, with one big exception, which I'm very introverted. I'm very comfortable with people, love, lots of relationships, etc. But I really, really value my quiet alone time. And working from home has always been a good combination for me, with the exception of as soon as kids came along, that got a lot more difficult.
Yeah, good luck being introverted with
um,
kids.
yeah, but I will say even though I've pretty much worked remotely and from home my entire career, literally since the time I was 16, and I've never spent any concerted amount of time in a team office environment. uh, and so sometimes that can get, even though it's not, for me it's not lonely in the sense of like needing human connection, but
Mhm.
it is very isolating in the, if you don't take steps to get exposure with other people, to see what other people are working on, you can kind of just be working in your bubble and then not realize what the rest of the world around you is doing. And so I always found it super helpful, whether it's going to conferences, going to, team meetups, heck, going to a anything even as simple as like an art show that has nothing to do with your industry other than art. That alone helps a lot. I used to get a lot of, when I was doing a lot of active modeling, because modeling was always my focus. I used to get a lot of inspiration from, um, particularly like sculptural galleries. And
Mhm.
this is very focused for me, because the thing that I love to do, which is not all that relevant today, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, is topology. That was my jam. I loved
Yeah.
complexes, meshes. Uh, one of my team gives me crap all the time because he always says that I was the guy that liked to model cloth by hand, like all the wrinkles and folds in your hoodie. I wanted to
Mhm.
model that by hand. That's the type of work that I liked to do. And so sculptural work in particular was always super inspiring, because like I would just go look at forms and how shapes came together. and then try to figure out how I could create that with a mesh. That was the hard way to do it. It's way easier now.
I remember doing that, like finding the perfect edge loops
Oh yeah,
and getting your ridges all right. And then, yeah,
but it's kind of fun
there's
because you know,
something soothing about the tediousness of it.
but there's also I think real value in finding tedious things like that you enjoy because they
Hmm.
then lead to other things. And in my case, it led to designing a retopology tool that we still make and sell to this day that represents a pretty decent chunk of our business.
Hmm.
So we still make that tool and we've been working on it for 10 years. And that only came about because I was unhealthily obsessed with good meshes and I didn't like the tools that existed to help make them.
I love it.
So,
Great. Let's move on to another
yeah,
question.
let's do it.
We've got this one that says, "What's the best engine to learn if you want to work at Riot Games in the future?" I'm currently focusing on Unity. So we get this
This
question
one's
a
all
lot.
you.
Unreal versus Unity are the two sort of major game engines. There's many others, and I think for anyone out there who's working in a different game engine, you know that Unreal and Unity both have their limitations, and that sometimes a custom game engine is the right way to go for certain games that you want to be able to do more. Um, I'm not going to go too much into the details of what those limitations are because I'll probably make people angry one way or another. But I will say, um, it's kind of one of those funny things where you get passionate about a certain tool and you just love it, and you get obsessed with it. And I think that's great, actually, that community drives so much on these different tools that we use. Um, the question is specifically about Riot Games. As far as I'm aware, Riot mostly uses Unreal Engine, right? Like, um, they've mentioned when they have positions that they're hiring for their MMO, they're looking for Unreal Engine engineers. That's public information on their jobs page. We know that Valorant and 2XKO are done in Unreal, and chances are good if those three major projects are being done in Unreal, then they're probably pretty heavily invested in Unreal at that studio specifically. We see this as a trend where if a studio is going to use out of the box engine solution, they are, and they're a large studio, like a big multi-billion-dollar institution. We see them frequently choosing Unreal, and this is just industry wide as far as I've observed. When studios are trying to do things on a very defined or limited budget, sometimes they still might use Unreal, or they might choose Unity for like its flexibility and smaller team size and all the different things that they can do with it. Um, the way Unity's built is more optimized in many ways, and so teams that want to like ship on platforms that need optimization while still looking great might go with Unity. Unreal lends itself more to like bigger, more scalable solutions for like AAA. Some AAA games are done in Unity, and some mobile games are done in Unreal. I think it's worth mentioning. Like, I again, I'm not necessarily a deep expert on the nuance of strengths and weaknesses between the two, but this is just stuff I've observed. It's why we teach both at VFX Apprentice because there's so many pros and there's so many cons on both sides of the option that we just decided let's just teach both, because depending on what your goals are and the kind of studio you want to work at, um, Unity for what was there was a catchphrase. I don't think this is probably an oversimplification, but it's there are more jobs in Unity, but there's more money in Unreal, which I think kind of sums up the spirit of what I've been saying, that like smaller independent studios or solo developers might gravitate more towards Unity, and there's a lot more of
Yeah.
those. But then the big money, the big studios backing up big budget projects tend to want to use Unreal.
What are you seeing, kind of just as a tangent related to that?
Hmm.
What are you seeing in a lot of this, I guess both the large, well-established studios, but also the smaller up and coming studios for their asset pipelines? How is that changing over the last few years from your perspective? Having come from a very established studio like Riot, which I believe Riot was all Maya and I mean, I know we talked about the engine side, but for their asset production, was it largely Maya for the 3D side?
Yeah, so generally speaking, asset pipelines at game studios are just a dumpster fire. They're just so bad. um, you'd be amazed. Like the biggest studios have some of the worst, like most inefficient ways to get things. They'll be using all the different things. Well, we did use that software, and now we've
Mhm.
migrated, and some of our devs are still using old versions, and it's insane. The
Yeah.
amount of it's crazy. But they
Is that
make
just
cool
because at the end of the
games.
day, the engine is basically the single source of truth, and they don't care as much
That can
where
be
things come
true.
from to get
I
into
mean,
the
I'm not
engine?
a tech artist, so, but I work with tech artists all the time who
Uh-huh.
set up the pipeline and figure out what the tooling is gonna be, and they may have depending on the maturity of the game, they may have, export tools that are specifically built for Maya or Blender or whatever, um, for example, or Photoshop or whatever
Mhm.
else they're using to export images out more efficiently. Or there may be no export tools at all, and it's just you just export to the image format.
Yeah.
You might need a plugin to get like the specific image format that y'all are using as a standard. There might not be a standard image type that you use. It just really varies.
Mm.
Um, Depending on how good your tech artists and engineers were at setting up the pipeline or at more likely overhauling the pipeline, because like it was a few people working on it early on. They didn't know they didn't know what they didn't know. They
Mhm.
didn't know that they should have been using standardized file types and tooling or whatever, and they just started building something. And then you get people coming in with like, no, okay, this is how we're gonna optimize and refresh it because we actually have a good prototype, but it's totally unsustainable and unscalable. And so they'll make it scalable, they'll make it sustainable. I think dreaming of a world where, yeah, we just make games and they're perfectly organized and ordered every time. I mean, maybe there are studios doing this behind closed doors that I'm not aware of, that like just have their shit together and they know exactly how their pipeline goes, and they have all the latest versions and the perfect IT department to manage it, and the great tech artists that are on top of things and enforcing the standards and making it easy for the artists to do the standards. Or it might just be, we have a deadline next month, people. We don't have time to set up standards. Let's just ship this thing. Let's get it out the
Just get it out
door.
there.
Which is what push comes to shove. Like the
Yeah.
players need a game, the investors need to see return. You got to get this thing out the door. And so it's a bit of a shit show.
Yeah.
More often than not. And I don't, it's hard because like it, it somehow happens again and again with seasoned veteran developers. I see it happening again and again and again. And it's to the point where I'm like, I don't fault people. I think this is just a part of the creative process. Wrangling a group of creatives to ship a creative product at the level of like what games are,
Yeah.
with such a small limited team size and so many unanswered questions
I'm
that,
gonna I'm gonna ask you the
yeah,
elephant in the room
I'm
question that
ranting.
we know it's
You
gonna
go
we
ahead,
know
you
it's
interrupt
we
me.
know it's gonna happen. I mean, it's already come up in chat a little bit, and we have a couple in our notes. We had a couple of people ask about it. You were mentioning the size of the team and getting everybody working on the same, you know, within
Yeah,
the same rhythm. You name it. How do you how recognizing that we're going to get right into the realm of opinion? How do you think the scale of game teams are going to change in the next few years
yeah.
with generative AI?
Okay, so I think a lot of these things that we're seeing now were in motion before AI, right?
Mhm.
The layoffs and the the reworking of the industry. I'm following a lot of games reporters, and it's really, really interesting to see what's going on. Um, More my personal favor is more the independent games reporters, because I mean, they're gamers themselves. They're very blunt and they're very like
Mhm.
open about what's going on, and there's a lot of interesting things out there. Um, from what I'm seeing, I think, uh, first off, it's really rough for a lot of game developers right now. A lot of people are out of work, and it's
It's always been a
very,
rough industry, though.
yeah, we've
Is it
had
rougher than?
tens of thousands of layoffs in the past couple of years. I don't know what the number is currently, but it's been brutal. It's
Yeah,
been a lot of layoffs. And there's no denying that the industry has undergone and it still seems to be still undergoing transformation of sorts. And there are critics saying, you know, rather heartlessly, in my opinion, yeah, good riddance, like it was too much bloat and all this stuff. I mean, I've worked in these studios, I still work with these studios, I'm still
yeah,
helping them. And in my opinion, like, I don't think, similar I was saying before, like, I don't fault anyone. Like, people are just doing their jobs. They're trying to get the game out. They're doing their best. They're super talented. I think what it comes down to is like, it's so many factors combining to build an unsustainable business model. When you combine the amount of investment that's come into it, when you combine the number of studios that are now all trying to compete to all get games out. If you look on Steam, this is crazy. There's the like new on Steam that you get on the front
hmm
page, right? When you first log into Steam, that's not all the new games. A lot of those games are like a month old. You have to go into, like, I think it's 3 clicks deep to see the actual stream of new games that are posted to Steam. And it's something like 30 plus games a day or more, depending on the day, right? When you finally get in to actually see the actual games, and only a handful of those are featured because they're getting good traction, they have a good following, they had a good marketing run, or they're a well-known studio, whatever, that they're now being featured on the front or second page of like the new games. um so that's a factor. There's always been a lot of people. You mentioned it's always been that way. There have always been a lot of people that want to work in the creative industries, right? People want to express their creativity, they want to have fun at work. That's awesome. That's why I got into it, and that's what I encourage people to
yeah.
do. I think we have to be clever when
If
we
you,
do it. That's
so
the only thing.
let's set aside
Yeah.
the pain of the industry is going through right now.
Yeah.
Just pretend it doesn't exist for a moment.
Okay, hard to do, but okay, I'll
Very
try.
hard to do. Very hard to
Yeah.
do. It's a hypothetical.
Yeah.
As somebody that as an artist, when you want to express yourself, like you just said it well. That's why so many of us either do what we do, got started doing what we do, or continuing to do what we do.
Mhm.
Do you think that we're going to see a giant surge in people being able to express themselves because of AI tools now? People that previously were not able to. And again, we're ignoring all of the icky questions and the icky issues around generative AI, copyright, and things like that. Let's ignore that for a moment.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. And this is what I've been really curious of, because from my end, I'm particularly curious because my direct work isn't that affected. At least as my day-to-day work is. My what used to be my day-to-day work is very affected.
Mhm.
I'm just not doing as much of that anymore. Um, but so one of my really good friends has more ideas than he can possibly put on paper, and he doesn't have a creative bone in his body. He, for whatever reason, does not have the ability to create the things that he wants. It's just never been in the cards for him for multitude of reasons. But he has all the ideas, he has all the stories, he has all the characters, and now suddenly, for the first time in his life, in his late 30s, he's finally able to express himself. Now he's doing it with the aid of AI, and it's complicated because on one hand you're saying, well, you're not creating anything, you're just using other people's creations that have been mashed together.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, is that any different than somebody remixing music, or being inspired by other drawings? And what's where's the balance here between his ability to now create things that he could never possibly create before.
Well, you remember early on, I was like, there's enjoying the creation process,
Hmm.
and then there's making
Making.
money. There's making something for fun, and then there's making money, right?
Hmm.
And I think it's very important for us to be clear in our own minds why we're endeavoring to do something.
Yeah.
If you're saying, is the opportunity to make more money bigger because of AI off of creative pursuits? No, I don't think AI really changes that because you still have to work really hard to now try and compete with all the AI slop,
Hmm.
right? That's a lot of work to try and crank out enough content at a high enough quality with
In a way,
AI.
the competition's even harder now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think making money is any easier because of AI. And that's one reason why artists are so furious is because actually it makes making money harder for a lot of people, which I think is totally legitimate reason to be upset. It's taking away a lot of these jobs even already.
Hmm.
Now, if we're talking about on the other hand, okay, but what about having fun? Being creative with AI, making something that matters to you. Those 30 different games that are all being posted to Steam every day. A lot of those are just passion projects. It's people not really expecting to make money. Some of them people were hoping to make money, and that's unfortunate that they're caught up in this, you know, they're getting buried by the deluge of content. But if they're in there just to have fun, cool. Like maybe it's not featured on the front page.
It
Maybe
doesn't matter at that
only
point.
20 people ever play it, and you're excited for those 20 people, and you like build lifelong connections with those people. That's amazing. I think if that's your goal and you're clear on that goal and you're just doing it to do it, that's legitimate.
Yeah.
Now, making art to make money is kind of what we specialize in at VFX Apprentice. That's kind of the focus,
Yeah.
right? Because people are paying us money and it's at a premium. Our classes are not this like, minimum you could possibly pay for something to get minimum education. Like we expect people to pay us like a decent enough amount so that we can give them content so they can get jobs,
Yeah.
so they can make money doing this at a high level. And I think it's important to be clear about that. Like, yes,
Oh, it
of
is.
course, we have fun doing what we do, but at the end of the day, we're dumping all of our resources and time into this, studying this, learning this.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, we need to make it into a job. We need to make money out of it. And I think that goes to your question about your friend with the AI. It's like, I don't know. It sounds like he's got some cool stuff to get out there to the world. I hope he does. I hope he has fun
Hmm.
doing it. I don't think he's going to have an easy time making money off of it. He might
Well,
make money
he's
off
lucky
of
in this
it,
case
but it's
because it is purely for fun. It is purely personal
yeah,
passion projects.
yeah. Which is, by the way, also more ethical.
Yeah.
I mean, there are
It
other
gets
like
it gets around a lot
environmental
of the ethical
ethics around
issues
AI,
that
of
way.
course, but like
Yeah.
as far as like the IP infringement goes, it's more ethical to do it for fun
Hmm.
versus to try to now make money off of other people's work,
Yeah.
right? And so there's, I mean, yes, like I said, there's a huge environmental drain, uh, ethics issue with AI as well. Um, but yeah, so interesting stuff. Does that
It's
kind of
it is. It's
resolve that for you?
oh,
You want
totally
to talk
does.
more about this, or
I
do you
mean,
want
I
to move
think
on?
oh we can move on. It's one of those topics that like for example on the CG cookie side and the super hive side. Actually, the super hive side in particular with the marketplace, it comes up constantly. And it comes up in number one, recognizing on Superhive, it is exclusively within the commercial context. It is a
Hmm.
marketplace. Everything that is uploaded to Superhive is made available for sale.
Hmm.
And there is at least a safe assumption there that the person uploading it is trying to make money with it.
Hmm.
They're not uploading it to a marketplace just for fun. Uh, but we see it constantly of just whether it's the ethical issues, whether it is the questions as to did you make this thing? Is this actually your product?
Mm.
Are you just reselling the output and you think it does what you it does? Can you support it? Can you show that it actually does the thing that you're saying it does?
Hmm.
We've had a host of, because keep in mind in this case, most of these tool or products are tools. So they're add-ons for Blender that are integrating an AI in some context. Some of them generative, some of them supportive, and some of them quite simply are just a can of worms. Like uh, we can't, we don't even know if we can have this, much less
Yeah,
whether it's going to work.
because the term AI means too many different things.
Yes, it does.
It's kind of like VFX.
Yes.
It's too broad.
we're, we're
So
going broader, just CG.
some things that used to be called algorithm are now just called AI,
Hmm.
or they used to be called, yeah. So like you got to be more specific of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
is this the type of AI that infringes on other people's copyrights and IPs?
Mhm.
Or is this like just a simple algorithm that just looks at patterns and then generates an answer
Yeah.
based on that?
Yeah.
Like, as we're learning more about AI, we're learning a lot of it is smoke and mirrors, that it's not actual, it's not the thing we're afraid of. But then also there's other things that's like, well, that's just scummy. That's just taking other people's work and then bending it to a new, and if it's work that's owned by the organization that's putting out whatever. I mean, there are these instances, like I believe Adobe Firefly is ethical as far as I know, because its data set
As
is all Adobe owned.
as I understand it, it is.
Yeah.
But
So there's like exceptions, and then
yeah.
there's
Yeah.
others that just don't care.
Well, I
But
think honestly, I think that's one of the things that I actually find very encouraging about where generative AI in a visual context is going is I think in the next months, years, etc., we are going to have a much better understanding of what is an ethical AI model and what is not.
well, and
You know,
I am excited that smaller groups are going to, if the promise of AI delivers, and honestly, some of these tools I've tinkered with and they're terrible and they're
oh yeah,
actually not what they're claiming to be today. Like
yeah,
today, they're saying it can be and do this. And then I use it and I spend a good amount of time using it. I'm not just using one prompt and giving up, I'm like diving deep into it. And it's still kind of like,
well,
yeah,
and then you start realizing the more you're using it, how much you're relying on your original skills as an artist or whatever you're doing,
exactly.
and you realize,
Exactly.
oh
It's
no,
it's like
this
this is
is
kind of like making a thing with working with an artist.
yeah.
It's just the turnaround, I guess, is faster, but then
Well,
I
and
have all
it's
these
also
other
just
issues.
recognizing
And
that it's not a replacement in many
no,
cases, at least. It is
it's
not a
not.
replacement. It is a companion tool, uh, and I I hope that it proves to be a good
It
thing. But
but back to my point, if it does deliver, let's say it does deliver on its promise of democratizing whatever the heck that means, democratizing art, we might see just more content, and we might see some of the big behemoths being challenged by even more small groups. But like I said, that trend, a lot of these trends that we're seeing have already been in motion before AI. Like like some of these smaller studios are able to upset the market already,
mhm.
and it's not because of AI. It's because they're scrappy, talented, creative people
Well,
working their
hell,
tails off, doing some really cool stuff. And I think that's the formula for success. It always has been. I think
yeah,
it's always going to be.
yeah.
If you
It's
want to be a
you know
successful creative.
the thing that actually makes me very encouraged when you talk about large studios or large um, just large games trying to compete is when you recognize that every single major franchise, pick any of them over the last 20 some years,
Hmm.
every single one of them ends up getting disrupted by a small and scrappy team that figured out a different way to do something that was super fun, super fresh, super compelling, and then they're the ones getting copied again. And that's okay. That's just kind of the natural cadence of
That's yeah.
creative work. It's
There's
okay.
business theory around that,
Yeah.
incumbent and insurgent, and they
Yeah.
flip. The
They
insurgent becomes the incumbent.
mhm.
The incumbent has
It's
to defend itself, and it gets locked in its
and
old
it's
ways.
totally normal. And I think as creative people, it's actually very I find it very reassuring because you're like, look, just focus on creating those things that are super interesting to you. And of course, try to balance that with paying your bills. If you can find a way to do the things that are interesting to you and pay your bills in the process, all the better. If you can't,
Mhm.
find a way to support yourself that then gives you the freedom on the side to do those things.
Mhm.
Uh,
All right.
all right. Why don't you
Enough.
pick the next
Enough
question?
AI.
Yeah, pick the next one.
Sorry, everybody, if you're tired of hearing about AI. We'll
It
move
never
on to new
stops.
topics.
It never stops.
So, Jessa Pickenbrenner asked, how to scale an online education business effectively. How do you manage the increasing workload of many different related tasks and stay productive and not overwhelmed? I don't know. If you figured out, Jessa, let me know, because
It-
uh, still working on that one.
so I can I'm with you. I don't think we figured it out. I mean, and we are. You started in 2020 with VFX Apprentice, or 2019,
Yeah.
right? CG Cookie started in 2009, so got a pretty good head start, and I have not figured it out. But I can definitely talk to some of the things that we have done and like the challenges that we run into that don't go away. Because they're kind of basically like the challenges that you have to overcome. And there, I would approach it from two sides. There's the customer side. How do you scale it and like getting enough audience, getting your customer. Growing an audience is probably the hardest thing to do in business. And I would say that
Mhm.
a lot of people do it by accident. I did it by accident. When I first started, I didn't set out to grow an audience around my Blender tutorials. I just happened to tap into a need that I don't think I even realized was there as much. I was just doing things that interested me and then found out that other people were interested in doing it. And then I found out that they would pay me to do more of that thing. And so I did more of that thing. And then they paid me again. And I did more of that thing. And they paid me again. That's right place, right time, super lucky.
Yep.
But so scaling the audience is one thing. Intentionally trying to scale an audience is incredibly difficult. There's so much competition, but it's also
Yep.
like one of the most important things you can do. Well, I mean, Jason, you and I have talked about it many times. Like, can we get the business over this hump? Like this, like for example, for CG Cookie, the CG Cookie business on the education side has basically been at a plateau for quite a few years now where it does really well, it's super healthy, it's got a great team, it's got a great customer base, but its customer base is the same size that it was 6 years ago,
Mhm.
and we just can't get past that next plateau.
Right.
Now you can make the argument like, do we need to? And that's a whole different thing.
Yep.
So scaling the customer side, the audience, is one that honestly is so much more dependent on individuals and marketing and just your own skill with everything.
So
Scaling the business, that's a whole different challenge. In particular, like if you think like look inwards for a moment, and so now
yeah.
you're talking about tutorial. Like okay, we're talking education business, so scaling tutorial production, coming up with fresh content on a regular basis, regularly updating content as new software versions come out, making sure that you're teaching a wide breadth of whatever your niche is. For us, for CG Cookie, it's Blender. We teach Blender, which unfortunately
Mhm.
means we also teach everything. We teach visual effects, we teach modeling, we teach animation, we teach rigging, we teach architectural visualization. It just keeps going and going and going because we teach Blender, and Blender is in everything. Um, Looking back, we should have said, we teach modeling in Blender, nothing else. um, but scaling that side, honestly, I think that's the much more difficult. And there's no right answer to it other than you just gotta keep working at it. You bit by bit, you get better, and you won't even notice the improvements unless you look back a year or two and then realize, oh my gosh, we used to do that. It was that much work to get a new tutorial produced or whatever. Um, for me, the big thing for scaling it has just been really focusing on slowly growing the team all the time. Growing their
So
skills, growing people.
I like what you're saying. I'm looking around because I'm just thinking, I'm like, man, that resonates. Yeah, that hits. Something that I want to add on top of what you're
Mhm.
saying is like because I've read so much. I've read so much. I've listened to so many podcasts about people telling me how to run my business, and they've never met me, and they've had some success. Maybe they had more success with their podcast or their book than they did in their own business. I don't know. They're acting like they really know what they're talking about, and maybe they do. But the thing that I'm realizing is, for me, it's about having a good business first,
Mhm.
serving your customer first, do what they want first, and everything else comes after. I mean, scaling the customer base, scaling your size, offering new products, new types of content. Um, I've lost track of this. I mean, you get caught in the weeds, right?
It's
Because you're
very easy to
like,
get
you're
caught in the
listening
weeds.
to the podcast, you're reading the books, and you're like, oh, I need to scale it. I need to like,
Mhm.
I need to dial this thing in, and I need to hustle, and I need to, and you know what I got? I got burnout and debt. It's like it
Those
was
things suck.
so, like you said, it's so hard to do it when it's like fitting a square peg in a round hole, because it's like your market, whatever business you go into, your market is people.
Mhm.
Your audience is people. It's human beings that have lives, they have hopes, they have dreams. They look to you and wonder, is this worth it? Like they have a story that, they want something from you. They're
Mhm.
spending money on whatever your business is because it's hopefully going to make their life better. And if you don't do a good job at making their life better, they're not going to tell their friends about you. They're not going to come back and buy from you again. They might ask for a refund. If you don't put them first, you have nothing.
Yeah.
And I don't know why all these, like, there's all this talk about scales and KPIs, and I'm like, you know, part
Well,
of the
so
reason,
many of those things, like so many of them just miss the connection,
yeah,
the real human connection that people
yeah,
feel when they go in and they get good service. There's actually one of my, I've had the privilege now of hiring about 25 people over the years in various
hmm,
roles. And one of my favorite um, histories or favorite like prior roles for somebody to have had is to have worked in customer service, or specifically
I've done customer
to
service.
have
Yes.
worked in hospitality, to have been a
Ooh,
bartender, a barista, even a retail person, because that's face to face customer service that you just can't get any more real than that. And it's also really hard,
hmm,
and it's
dang, yeah,
you can typically ascertain how somebody responds to customers based on how they talk about their time in a hospitality job.
hmm,
If they come in super jaded and really hating people and always feeling like they're being taken advantage of, they're probably not going to be a good fit for a customer facing role.
yeah,
Not saying they wouldn't be a good fit for a different role, but it's just yeah, the it's not to say that the customer is always right, because there's always those crappy customers that are just
yeah.
so entitled and awful.
Sorry if anyone out there is a crappy customer. Sorry, not sorry.
Uh, but it's just
I've been a crappy customer before. I know
oh,
what it's like to be a
we
crappy
all get those
customer.
we all get those moments. But no, just recognize that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you make. If you are selling a product or a service, you are a
Mhm.
business. Your business lives and dies based on your customers.
Well, it's a lot like
You
being
got
an
to take care
artist,
of them.
right? You can make art, but if people don't enjoy it, then it's not communicating what you intended for it to communicate, right? If people don't appreciate it, if they're not seeing it, if they don't care about it, then
Yeah.
you need to master the craft and get better at making art. And I think making a business that is worthy of being scaled is a craft and an art of its own, you know. and
Hmm.
and and it I will say this, as hard as it is to scale a business, it's much easier to scale it if your customers love you and
Oh
you're
yeah.
finding really, really strong success with a niche group of people that are really dedicated to you.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to scale a business if your customers are not having a good time.
No, it's really, really hard if they're not having a good time.
Yeah. So I would say that. Now, as far as actually scaling it, I mean, we've scaled some, but similar to you, we tend to find a cap. I mean, effects for games is a niche thing. It's a niche job market, and so we do sourcing services for studios as well. And when we're looking for candidates, the studios will come to us. They're like, "We've already been looking for a few months, and we haven't been able to find anyone." And then we go through our list of contacts, and it's limited, but they'll usually find somebody from there. And it's not a mass recruiting effort. Like, I know these people because I've been following their work for
It's the
years,
classic
or
case
they've
of
been
like
through our
of
courses. And
word of
so
mouth referral is the best referral that exists. It
yeah,
doesn't get any better than that.
yeah. And so it's very boutique. It's
Well,
very custom.
case in point, I've known Pyrrhic for years.
Yeah,
When Pyrrhic said I should talk to you, or you said that Pyrrhic said I should talk to you, I was like, yeah, cool, let's talk.
yeah,
If that connection hadn't been there, Pyrrhic, if you hadn't been there, I don't know, would we have ever actually connected? Hard to know.
yeah.
But that word of mouth really, really matters. And you don't get word of mouth by being crappy to your customers. Well, you get the wrong kind of word of
It's true. It's true.
mouth.
We get upset customers, and we do our very best to handle it well because we know that our reputation matters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, you reach out to support. Benedict, uh, who I mentioned earlier in the chat, is there answering on support. Sometimes we get cases he forwards to me directly. And of course, I'm interested. Of course, I'm interested. If there's an especially difficult situation a customer is having, I want to know about it. I want to help with it.
Yeah.
It's like the lifeblood. The customers are the lifeblood of the company. It's everything. And so, um, I don't know. I would hope that even if somehow we did scale, maybe we went into like other topics that we taught, or we found a bigger audience somehow. I would hope that I would still have that attitude all the time and never lose sight of that. I think that's one of the challenges I had working at a larger company, that I would have working at any large company, would be loss of touch with the customer.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, how to scale it. It's funny. Riot Games, actually, speaking of the large company, I think they actually do quite a good job for such a big company. Usually, big companies don't do as well as Riot Games is doing at staying in touch with their customer. And I
It gets
know,
hard.
like, people can nitpick things that Riot has done, like, oh, I wish they did this better. Oh, I hate that they're. But like, I mean, you look at their track record, they do like move heaven and earth for their customer on many different aspects. Maybe some
Nice.
things they drop the ball on, okay, but I think they do a good job. I was at a convention when I was still working at Riot. This was a player convention, and I was giving a presentation there, in between some esports stuff and things like that. And then I was down just among the attendees at the conference, and there was a cosplayer there, eh, wearing Star Guardian Lux. Star Guardian Lux is a character, skin in League of Legends that I worked on, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I need a picture with you. This is amazing." And she's like, "Okay, sure." A conference person who wants a picture, no big deal. And I get this picture with her, and I'm like, it's great. And then she sees my badge, and she recognizes who I am as a cosplayer. No doubt she had done research. I had very publicly posted I'd worked on Lux, niche community as well. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, I need a picture with you." And so we both shared this moment of connection, of like, this is meaningful. This is like, this is a shared experience. She's not just a customer, she's a human being. And
Yeah.
so I think, like, I always try to remember that. And it's hard for my home office. I'm a human. I lose touch and sight of what's really happening in people's lives,
Well, and
but I
I
do
would
what I can to
actually,
stay in touch with it.
so
Yeah.
I would even argue that that's one of the most difficult things about scaling. So I think, the original question was like how to scale a business.
Hmm.
But there's also the aspect of like, what, once you get beyond the size where you can have a one-to-one relationship with every customer, you have to be very cognizant of how do you stay in touch. I would argue that one of the most most surprising difficulties of scale, for lack of a better word,
Hmm.
is staying in touch.
Hmm.
And you don't notice it when it happens. I can speak to
Because
on
you're
our
out of
side.
touch. So you didn't notice it.
But I think it's the transition that you don't really notice.
Yeah.
So like the super hive side, the marketplace is where it's the most difficult. On CG Cookie, for example, it's small enough that we can stay in touch with all the customers. Not necessarily on a first name basis, but a lot of them on a first name basis, and many of them just choose not to. On the Superhive side, it's way more difficult, and we have to work really hard. And actually, like we are constantly reminding ourselves of like, how do we build more of these connections? Because it's not as easy as just talking to all of them now because there's not enough hours in the day. There's 20 some thousand customers a month.
It was so
It's
funny.
really hard.
Can I just share a little
Yeah.
moment I had right
Yeah.
as you were talking? Because you're like, staying in touch is so important and it's hard to do. And I'm like, yes. And we should be answering questions and staying in touch.
Yes, we
And then
should.
I saw a question in the chat about what does a day in the life of a VFX artist look like? And I'm
Ooh.
like, man, how hypocritical is it that I'm not actually staying in touch with all these questions coming up as we're talking about staying? Because again,
Yeah.
like it's hard. And then Benedict comes in and answers the question in the chat. I'm like, bringing it all around. Like you got
Yep.
to have good people
You
that
gotta have
help you
good
with
people.
that because you're only one person.
You can
And
only
I
do so much. There's only so many hours in the day.
you know, this was a crazy moment for me when I was leaving Riot. I was like, I knew I was going to be putting in my 2 weeks notice soon. I reached out to one of the co-founders of Riot, Brandon Beck, and he had always said, hey, my door's always open if anyone wants to schedule an appointment with me. But it's like you revere someone like that. You're like,
Mhm.
oh, he's probably so busy and he's got a company to run and all these things. And I took him up on it. For the first time I had been there in 6 years, I finally took him up on it. I'm like, I'm going to schedule some time with Brandon Beck before I leave. And I did. And he made time for me. And he we talked and he gave me some advice on running a company. And I was very open with him and he was very cool with like, yeah, that's exciting. I'm excited for you to go do this thing. Just super chill guy. And I just think, the lessons I learned from that, like, you don't have to always be one on one with every single customer. You can't, it's not possible. But you can set up values and structures that reinforce that. And then please, for the sake of all that is good, like, find time yourself
Mhm.
to just go talk to a customer and make their day, make your day, and just have a connection. I think that's what I would say to anyone, because you can lose touch at any scale. I will say that it might be hard to keep touch at a large scale, but you can lose touch very easily at a small scale. You
And you
don't
can
need
lose
very
it
many
without
customers to
even
completely lose
realizing
touch
it.
with them. What's that?
And you can lose it without even realizing it until it's too late.
Yeah, and I have. And I've made that mistake. Sorry for anyone who recognized the time when Jason wasn't around and like things were kind of like, what's going on at VFX Apprentice? I messed up. I dropped the ball because I was so caught up in the company and the management and this new thing I was learning. I mean, I'm not necessarily like beating myself up about it. I'm just saying it easily happens, right?
Yeah.
So give yourself some grace, but like you can lose touch at any scale. And
Yeah.
so beware beware of that.
Yeah.
Um cool. All
So
right.
here's a question.
Yeah.
I'm going back to our notes really quick.
Yeah. More questions. Bring
Kind
them
of
on.
bouncing off of all of the discussions we've circled around. Is it a good time to dive into the real-time VFX industry? And what do you think about pushing for a tech artist in the long run? This comes from Amy.
I think that's a great question. So we were talking about layoffs earlier in the stream.
Mhm.
This is a reality that we can't deny. Um, it's it's challenging. I get this question a lot. It's a challenging one to answer because there's the the hustle culture answer, which is there's always room in any industry for the best. So if you're the best at what you do, you'll have a job. You'll be fine. That to me is appealing to a certain type of person. who is like, hell yeah, let's get it. Let's go for it. I'm going to make it happen. That's my personality. That's how I've been successful throughout my career. I just work way too hard and I throw my life out of balance. That's just
I
been
I
my
can relate to
life.
that.
What's that?
I can relate to that.
Yeah, and incidentally, I will say, like, that's pretty common, in games in general. Uh, People who throw their lives out of balance for the sake of their career are very common, especially amongst the younger tier, like,
I think it's
people in their
incredibly
20s
common in
getting in.
creative fields.
What's that?
I think it's very common in creative fields.
Yes. It's because there's so many people wanna do it, and there's only a limited number of jobs, and
Yep.
so the only ones who are gonna be able to do it are the ones who hustle like crazy. That being said, some people manage balance and they still get in. Uh, I don't know. It's so strange to me. I'm trying to like figure out the magical formula for like how they're able to do it. Um, there's like a number of factors, like they're just able to just like manage it. If you are like me and sometimes struggle with mental health and ADHD and OCD and all these other issues, oh, it can get rough. It's been really rough for me, over the years. I'm not gonna lie, like, chasing my dream has been sometimes it's felt more like a death march
Yeah.
versus a joyful romp through the flowers. Um, but I'm obsessed, and I can't bring myself to not do it, to do anything else. I just don't. I mean, I might arrive at that point. They say that I follow speaking of mental health, I follow Dr. K at healthygamer.gg. He's awesome. I love that guy. I hope to meet him someday. But um he was talking with a guest um on his live stream once, and he was talking about how there's a certain amount of like enlightenment in like the Eastern traditions where in order to I'm going to butcher it, you should go watch his live stream to get the actual, but the idea is that you need to have everything in order to realize that you don't need it, but like in order to get there to really let go of it all, you have to have it first, and then you learn, oh, I'm fine without it and I can really
Mhm.
let go of it. Otherwise there's always this sort of like jealous yearning of like, I wish I had it, but I need to let go of it, but it would be great if I had it, but I and it's this crappy realization because it's like, wait, you're saying that it's the wealthy that are most likely to be enlightened? And he's like saying, yeah, it's the ones who've kind of like risen to the top that have the freedom and the time to like chill. According to this theory,
Mhm.
I don't know, something he shared in my life, I'm never satisfied. I haven't arrived at wealth and like all this like freedom of worrying about anything because I have it all. Like I'm still hustling. And I think I'm going to
Yeah.
keep hustling until I realize
I
I
know
don't
for
need it
me,
anymore.
um, one of the things I've come to recognize about myself over the last few years, particularly, I hit really hard burnout about
Yep,
20,
that
20,
too.
well, first 2018 and then again in 2022. And, for a while there, I thought it was because I had just, I had, I had worked too hard. My entire identity was wrapped up in the work that I was doing, teaching Blender, being a Blender artist, working on Blender, just all things Blender. And it took probably like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. Really, only in the last 2 years did I really kind of make peace with it. And okay, the thing that I struggled with was my entire identity was wrapped up in Blender. I wasn't doing the Blender work anymore.
Mhm.
I was running a Blender company, but I didn't want to do the Blender aspect of it anymore that I'd been doing for 20 years, that the business had been built upon. And I felt like a fraud. I'm like, I don't even do the Blender work anymore. How can I run a Blender company?
The ego
Uh,
gets challenged, the
oh yeah,
ego of Blender guy.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, and I really struggled with it for a while. And for a while, I was convinced that the only answer for me was to just leave, to not be in a Blender company anymore, to not be a Blender artist anymore, to not use Blender because clearly like I couldn't do it anymore. So I just have to remove that from my identity. I have to find a new identity. Well, long story short, I discovered that really that has nothing to do with it. It's not that I was missing Blender, is that the thing that has always given me purpose that I just didn't realize is I just like problem solving.
Hmm.
You know, for me, problem solving is a creative endeavor. I like hard problems that don't have a clear answer, but that have a lot of crappy outcomes if you do it wrong. And I like finding a better outcome for that problem.
Yeah.
And I've realized like that's the thing that I really enjoy. And so, for example, for me, one of the things that has changed is I'm still not doing that much Blender work compared to like how I used to. I'm doing more. I'm doing a lot more in the last year than I have in probably the last 5 years combined. But the thing that I'm really enjoying is working on the problems adjacent to it, working on the business, working on, the like the architecture of the business of how we reach people, how we communicate with customers, how we like what are the problems that we're actually trying to solve, how do we help creators on the market make money sustainably and not just burn themselves out. Like
Yeah.
those are the things I now like working on. uh and yeah, I think, just to your point, like the that drive to create that you really just you want to keep working, to work hard to an unhealthy degree, that that's been my entire life. But then
Yeah.
I lost my channel for how to channel that work, and I was very lost for a couple of years. uh so
Yeah, I think finding yourself through the journey of burnout and chasing your passions and dreams is a very common theme I hear among many friends.
mhm,
I think, this kind of goes back to like the question, what is the day in the life of a VFX artist?
yeah.
It's like, I mean, we come into work, we sit down, we wonder how in the world we got here, and eventually we're going to get figured out. You sit there and sweat nervously about how you're going to get figured out. Lunch comes way too soon and you didn't get enough done and you're nervous about that and you were sitting through a meeting and you're behind schedule. And then the afternoon comes and somehow you get it done and you hit this deadline for one more day. And then you do it all over again. It's just this was so much my experience day after day, is just the anxiety of, can I do it? This is not what I'm creating now, has not been created before, and it needs to be amazing and it needs to be impressive and it needs to be justification for why they're paying me all this money to do it. Like, that to me is the conundrum of that hustle of being an artist, and it's immensely emotionally draining. I think we don't understand how emotionally draining it can be sometimes and how important it is to take care of yourself. So for me, um, you know, uh, for me, meditation
Mhm.
is helpful. I I don't always do it because sometimes I'm like, I'm not in the mood to meditate. I'm usually not in the mood to meditate. It's extremely helpful. From my childhood, there's prayer, the practice of actually like praying. I'm not religious anymore, but I still do it just because it's kind of a sort of meditation that's more familiar to me. It helps calm my nerves and it just helps me chill out, even if the mechanics of it are slightly different. But finding some practice for yourself to emotionally regulate in a sustainable way,
Mhm.
not necessarily with escapism, I think is critical. I think
Yeah.
whether you're running a business or working as a creative or trying to get a job as a creative, I think you really need to learn and go inward and understand your mind and understand what's going on and how to be an observer, a compassionate observer of your own self, and stop uh, tearing yourself apart from the inside out with that emotional burnout that just plagues us. The imposter syndrome that we
Yeah.
experience fairly
Well, and it's
universally.
I would say it's particularly key, to
Hmm.
try to particularly if you haven't gone through that yet,
Hmm.
to start preparing for it. Um, but I would be curious to know, and you have a lot more studio experience than I do. I've pretty much always been self-employed, for better for worse.
Hmm.
Um, how was that with, the pouring your heart and soul into it, burning out, not finding that balance, etc.? Did you see, was that were basically almost all creatives at the studio level struggling with that, or did that tend to be those people that were just, they were all in, they were all invested?
Yeah, I think I was starting to say something like it's universal, and it's not. I don't think every developer experiences this. Like I said, some people tend to find balance and they can manage it. Maybe their wiring is different. Maybe they're they've got other practices that help them. I don't know. Um, it takes all kinds. So what you do find in the entertainment industry is that people are very diverse,
Mhm.
extremely diverse people. Um, it's what makes the creative process so fun for me. I really love that.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating sitting at lunch with people with entirely different backgrounds from my own. And somehow we all found our way to the same company on the same project. And it blows my mind.
Yeah.
So I will say that, like, everyone's experience, mine is mine. You know, the things I mentioned are things I'm going through. They might apply, they might not. And I always try to, I know that I'm in a position of like influence when I'm teaching and like and helping people learn. But look, if anything about me or Jonathan doesn't resonate with you, that's great. That's fine.
Yeah.
Find your own way. If it does resonate, that's great too, obviously. But yeah, you were asking about how are people, what was your question? How are
Well, so I was
people,
curious, I was curious, particularly on the larger studios,
yeah.
you know, of course, we're talking about a very diverse group of people, many different
Hmm.
studios, different worlds, different backgrounds, you name it. But from my perspective, it seems that particularly creative people, and I'm saying creative in the art sense, not creative problem solvers, just creative people in the visual art sense, tend to struggle with this balance more. Like,
Hmm.
I had actually an interesting college experience where the dorm that I was in, I went to Kansas State University and I was in the art program. But the dorm that I was in was artists and engineers. Those were the two. Um,
Hmm.
all of us as artists, were just, we gave it our all in the emotional sense. We poured our heart and soul into what we were studying, and I mean, very just, we were very emotionally driven by the work that we were doing, the mediums we were working with. We were trying to connect. We were trying to express stories and feelings through art. None of my engineering friends, who most of my friends were engineers, none of them struggled with that same emotional balance of burnout and, pouring your heart and soul into it. They
Yeah.
were far more capable of, and I mean this, I think, as a compliment, that I found that most of them were far more capable of going to work, coming home, and leaving work at work.
Yep.
That is not something I've ever been able to do
Yep.
until the last couple of years. And it took me hitting rock bottom to finally learn how to do it. And I wouldn't say that I've actually learned how to do it. I know in theory how to do it. uh,
Yeah, there's the practice of it is different. So
yeah.
definitely. And then what I'm saying is this is a very common thing. I don't think it's universal with all artists and
Mhm.
creatives. It is common though, and I see it a lot. And I think one thing that happens with me and with so many other people I know is we put ourselves into it. Sounds like you're putting yourself into it. And when you put yourself into your work and then someone critiques your work, they're critiquing you. And I think the practice of being critiqued on such a personal, intimate level on a regular basis, and then also hitching your livelihood and financial income to that, that is emotionally draining.
Yeah.
That is emotionally challenging. It's just gonna be. If
Yeah.
if that's the mechanics of what's happening, and I sense that it is, what has
Yeah.
happened with me and what does happen with others, we put ourselves into our work. Our work is judged and critiqued, and then our livelihood, our payment is based on that work. We're externalizing so much of our own value that,
Maybe that's why you see the exact same thing in entrepreneurs, regardless of what kind
yeah.
of business they're in.
So the basic problem is this is a basic problem, and this is why I mentioned meditation, because the basic problem is we're putting our value onto something that's out there and vulnerable for other people to tell us you're worthless, potentially. That's a big fear. The fear of being told you're not worth it. You're going to get laid off. You're not going to get paid as. And there was another question about pay that I want to get to as
Yeah, I
well.
was gonna.
You're not going to get paid as much, um, because it's like I put myself out there, and they're judging me, and they're telling me I'm worthless or I'm not worth as much as I want to be.
You
It's
know,
like,
I think you just nailed it. I hadn't really considered
yeah,
it from that
you
perspective,
have
but
to find the
I,
worth inside. Like, I know it's
yeah,
like this cliche, but it's true. That's what meditation is finding the infinite well of worthiness, of
well,
worthfulness, being of worth within yourself on your own without other people chiming in and telling you what you're worth.
yeah. I
It's
mean,
something
I
we all
suspect,
have to
I
come
imagine that
to.
you felt this not only with your own, VFX work, but with VFX Apprentice.
Hmm.
That when if
Oh yeah.
somebody critiques the business in a less than friendly
And
manner,
I am not a
it
master of
feels
this. I'm talking
personal.
about this, but I fall into it too,
Oh,
still,
oh,
definitely. But I'm just recognizing something I've noticed as a
I
pattern for me.
I've gotten better about not taking it personal when people say terrible things about my business, which is to say that I am still very personally affected when people say terrible things about it, regardless of whether it's warranted or not. That's honestly
Yeah.
is beside the point. It's the emotional response that is so real. Um, all right, let's. I want to get to that the other question about pay though, because that's obviously a big one that is relevant. So in the chat, Han asked, "Why do studios and companies consider countries when it comes to how much they pay for a VFX artist? It's so frustrating when you see yourself doing better than other artists and you get paid less." My interpretation of that question is effectively that why do companies choose to pay people for the same work in different countries less?
I think this is going into global economics, which I've also been following. I follow a lot of things. There's a guy, Gary's Economics. He's this British guy. He's this economist who ran into a lot of success coming off of the 2008 housing crisis. Um, he's good at predicting trends. He's good at understanding trends, and he's very blunt, matter of fact. I like Gary. Um, he's helped me understand a lot of the bigger picture of what's going on, just from a very matter of fact standpoint. It's not great. Like, first off, to Han, that sucks, and to anyone out there who has lost their job because now there's someone overseas that can do it for cheaper. That sucks. It's not a great human experience. What's happening right now, it's hard.
Mhm.
It's hard to see. It's hard to be a part of. It's not pleasant. I think looking at what's going on, it's not done. I think it's going to keep. I think globalization is here to stay, and it has all kinds of weird impacts, both in countries like the US and some Western European countries that are outsourcing their labor and they're outsourcing things, and also in the countries that are being um, recruited to do the outsourced labor. And, it's been around a long time, and it's coming around to this point in its cycle where it's getting very hard to ignore the sort of long term consequences. I don't think we can fix it overnight. I don't think there's any easy answer. I don't think fighting back is always the answer. So, like, advocating for, hey, you should pay me more, I don't think that's always the answer, because sometimes that creates more problems than it solves. Um, there are some companies that still pay fair rates across the board. They choose to do that. I don't know how long they're going to be able to do that, but they are out there. They do exist. And so you may be able to find work, to Han's question directly. You may be able to find work at another studio that will pay you better. That's
This is
a that's
you know,
something worth looking into. Yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
I really don't have much to add in the context of the VFX industry because you nailed it already. Um, you
Yeah,
know, obviously there's large global economic things that we just simply can't control. There's, if you set aside the emotion for a moment, it's the, you have the question of like, well, if you can pay this much for the same product or you can pay this much for the same product, why would, from a financial perspective, why would a company not go with the cheaper option? But that's a crappy answer, honestly. One of the things that I really wish more businesses would do, and this is across all industries, but pay transparency. You don't have to
yeah,
say what an individual person is paid, but you should be upfront with, hey, if this is the work, this is what we're hiring for, this is what we will pay regardless of where you're at. Particularly as, I I have a hope that one of the outcomes of COVID will be that with remote work being far more widespread, and yes, I know we're pulling back a little bit as people do return to office mandates and things like that, but broadly remote work is far more prominent than it's ever been.
hmm,
I hope that we can get to a point where most businesses operate their pay structure just based on what they can afford, not who they can take advantage of. And I know that's a little bit of loaded language because
mm,
most of those businesses are not intentionally trying to take advantage of an individual, but that is the outcome. Um, you know, I've always been a big proponent of equal pay for the work, and I don't care where you're at. So, for example, you know, setting a compensation baseline and say, hey, this is what we are going to pay for this position. It is then
yeah.
up to you
Well,
as
it's
the
definitely the more
applicant to decide
what
whether it's
what
worth
you're
your while.
describing is definitely more sustainable because it creates a lot of positive
Yeah.
outcomes.
Well,
If that was like a mandated policy somehow,
mm,
and there had to be equal pay for equal work across the board for all companies everywhere, that would be beneficial across the board. Because the system doesn't work that way, it's a crappy
yeah.
system.
Well, and, I wouldn't
It's
even
more
advocate
challenging.
for, a mandate across companies, like requiring one company to compete at the
Well, you
same rate as
couldn't.
company.
I'm saying
Right. You
hypothetically. There's no
can't.
way you could ever
But
get companies
but
to.
what
Yeah.
I think that most companies should do is to pay people in the same roles the same rate no matter where they are. For one, it gives your workforce, your team, far more flexibility. Why should somebody be afraid of losing their job if they move to a more expensive area or a less expensive area? Or,
Hmm.
if somebody wants to live in the absolute middle of nowhere, me, uh, and earn the same wage as somebody that is choosing to live in an urban environment, the business
Hmm.
shouldn't decide to pay one of those people more or less.
Yeah.
They should say, look, this is what this work is worth to
I'm
us.
just I'm
This
just
is
way
the
too
exchange of
practical for
value.
that.
Do what?
Like, so that thought experiment, that thought experiment to me, I'm like, yeah, okay, of course, but I'm so practical. So here's where I want to go
Mm,
with this, because, like, I love the world you're painting, but given the world we're in, it comes down to leverage. And for direct advice to Han and anyone
yeah.
else on either side of it, whether you're in a developed country or up and coming country where you would get paid less, it's all about the leverage. So, can you join? Let's say there's a company paying you less, right? Because you're in a developing country. Okay, how can you increase your leverage? Well, there are outsourced studios that employ people. You can stay where you live, but they employ people, but they negotiate for you. They bring more leverage because they have the infrastructure, they have the connections, they're working with bigger studios, they're like more established. They have the leverage to command higher rates, at least slightly higher than what you might be making if you're just on your own. So that's one way to work the leverage from there. If you're in the States or if you're in a Western European country and it's like, where's your leverage then? Well, you can find other ways to make yourself more valuable. Maybe diversifying your skill set, making yourself harder to fire, making yourself more valuable so that the company is looking at, through their roster, they're like, well, sure, we're paying this person this rate, but look at all that they're giving us.
That's a
You have more leverage, right?
Jason. You may
So,
have actually just given inadvertently the best piece of advice from this entire segment, which is if you are not the boss, and I'm going to say this as one of the two bosses in my company, as a co-founder, the one thing that is so helpful is those people that you work with or work for.
mhm,
If you can reduce their stress, you're invaluable. You're
mhm,
invaluable at that point. You know, reducing stress of the people that you report to is probably the single greatest piece of leverage you can ever have as an employee.
mhm.
And that
Yep,
applies to any industry.
yep. And so it's different types based on where you live, based on your circumstances. But the key is, okay, if I feel like the company I'm working for has all the leverage, where can I get a foothold? Where can I push back and get what I need? Practically speaking, it's a type of puzzle to solve, and you may think to yourself, "That's BS that I have to solve it at all." That's probably true. Capitalism is not my favorite personally. It's like not. I, it's not my favorite, and it's what we live in, and so I have to figure out what's the puzzle to solve to navigate that system as best I can,
Yeah.
and come out on the other side still being okay with who I am.
Yeah.
And that's something we all have to answer for ourselves.
It's I'm actually really glad that you asked that question, Han, because it's a difficult one, particularly in
Hmm.
such a, we work in a global industry for sure. And, most of the times I would say that's a good thing. But people getting taken advantage of for because of where they happen to live is a really frustrating reality in
Yeah.
that.
So Piano Bite is saying, do you think VFX artists or tech artists have the luxury of refusing a job because you don't because you're valued enough, or is it hard to find a job so you don't have a lot of liberty? Um,
I, I think
my
it's
answer to this was very different
uh,
4 to 5 years ago. I'd be like, absolutely, you have tons of leverage. VFX and tech artists are royalty, and you get the red carpet rolled out for you the moment you want to switch jobs. There were so many job openings. Um, the whole industry was hit. I do think the ratios are still the same. So even though there have been
the ratios in
layoffs,
terms of the jobs and the number of artists fighting for those
right?
jobs.
So, well, the ratio within so even though there were a lot of layoffs,
Mhm.
the minority of them were VFX and tech art, right? They weren't in the majority of layoffs.
Okay.
And so they were hit hard, but they weren't hit as hard as some of the others. So we do see senior level VFX artists having a relatively easy time sliding into new work, whereas people in, say, like concept art or environment art might be floating for longer, um, because yeah, the supply and demand still applies. Now, if you are, I mean, I always say, like, just look at what your goals are. So I have a job offer. I got the ick when I was in the interview. I'm not super excited to work with these people. Um, they're not going to be paying me very much. Okay, what do I want out of this? Do I want my first job on my resume? Do I want my foot in the door of the industry? Do I want this to lead to other things in a year or two? Or do I want to, wait a little longer because I already have that resume? I already have that. And I'm pretty sure someone else is going to say yes and much better opportunity in a couple of months, or maybe a couple of weeks. So, depending on where you're at in your career, yeah, I think you might be safe to turn down some jobs. Um, I think my advice to younger people is like, just take the job. I don't like, Why are you asking me? Why are you not already working there? You need experience. Just get the job. Um, one thing you can do, speaking of leverage, one thing you can try is if you have a relationship with another job that you have more interest in and you have like contacts there that have mentioned, like, yeah, your work's good and maybe we'll give you a shot. You can always mention to them, hey, this studio's looking at me. Last chance. If you want me to come work there, that's leverage, right? Because
Mhm.
now it's like you're a hot commodity, someone else wants you. You can leverage that to get a job at a studio that you would prefer. So I think you can try that if you want without any negative fallout, especially if you have that relationship already. But outside of that, if it's your first job, just take it. Like just be there for a year. You'll have war stories like the rest of us. It may not be great, but you'll have like in this climate, I think it's smart to just take the opportunities you're presented with. In this,
Well,
I
and
wouldn't be
always
saying
know
this
that
5 years ago, but these days
no
I'm like, go for it.
no opportunity ever has to be permanent.
No.
You can always vote with your feet.
Yeah. And if
If
it's
it's
something, if it's some weird thing like it is permanent, then yeah, I guess pass on it. I guess
well,
there's a
oh, I mean
limit
permanent
of
in the
like
sense of
how awful it
like
is.
you're not signing up for indentured servitude.
If they're
That
not paying
if it's
you, yeah.
crappy, they
If
don't
it's
pay. They don't
really
pull up there into the
horrible,
bargain.
obviously pass on
You
it.
bail.
But yeah.
Yeah.
I'm assuming in this question they're saying it's a viable job. I'm assuming. I don't, the way it was worded, they're like, "Can I be picky?" Which implies to me it pays a living wage plus, and maybe you just don't quite love the project, or you're not
I
super
would
thrilled about the
I would
people.
also say that if you find yourself not yet able to be picky because you don't have enough work, you're not paid enough. Like Jason said, it is best to take the jobs that you can get, take what comes your way, and build up that repertoire of clients, of
Yeah,
work, of everything, so that you can choose to be picky. Being able to be picky with the work that you do is one of the greatest privileges any creative person can have. So if you're not yet able to be picky, keep working at it so that you can be picky in the future.
speaking of being picky, they reached out to me about um, an issue they were having at work. Communication was a real challenge. They were mismanaged. This happens, you get managers that probably would be better as individual contributors and not overseeing the career development and mentorship of others, but they become a manager anyway, and now they're your manager and their communication is lacking, and it's frustrating and it's hard. And I will say this, all of my communication skills came from being stuck with bad communicators. I became a better communicator because I had to communicate with a bad communicator. And I don't know, that's not fun. It's never fun, but I think there's a bright side. And the same with a crappy job that you don't love. There's so much opportunity to learn and grow,
Hmm.
not just in learning to appreciate the day when you don't have it anymore, but you gain real skills in that environment,
Yeah.
interpersonal soft skills, hard skills, learning to be a self starter and like
We
get going when no one is
I
like
think there's some
helping you.
human nature to it that we tend to learn a lot more when things are difficult.
Yeah.
So even though
And I'm
we,
not making excuses for these
no,
studios and managers like, oh, they're fine. It's like, no, like there will be a chance to hold them accountable
but it goes to
too.
show how, for you, communication skills, gaining more communication skills will always serve you well.
Yeah,
Like that's one of those skills that is never going to go wasted no matter what you do.
exactly.
Unless you find yourself as a hermit on an island and you never need to make another dollar for the rest of your life or something. But
And we
that's
talked about hardship in this stream as well. Of like, it's been freaking hard, and I've like broken down at times, and sometimes that's because of other people letting me down. And it's like we can try to get the perfect job with the perfect team and the most loving, supportive, constructive, creative environment, but people are people, and we are not perfect ourselves. And so I think learning to learn as you go is just such an important thing, especially in a creative industry. Like, yeah, go for it. Like, it's fine. you might learn to love them too. I've met some more than more than a few people. When I first met them, I'm like, this person's an asshole. I hate this person so much. And we were really good friends by the end of my time working on the team. There were others that I still felt were assholes at the end. That happens too. But there were others that I was like,
There will always be assholes.
yes. And then there were some that I was like, you know what? I'm so glad that I know this person. They're so delightful and they help me grow. That's the thing. Usually it's the ones that you hate the most that help you grow the most.
Mhm.
Those are the ones you need in your life. And I know all of us probably can think of that one person in our
Well, they push
life.
us. They you know, they're not just reaffirming the things that we're already comfortable with. They're pushing us to be different, to do
Yeah.
things differently. Even, sometimes pushing us kicking and screaming, but
Yeah. Or you might
makes
still
you more
just hate
nimble.
them at the end and you didn't learn anything, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
actually fine. There's both that happen. Okay. There was a question before about sprite sheets. I think it was like
I'm gonna
early
scroll up, see if I
on.
can find it really quick.
That was like way back. I don't think that might have been answered in the chat. But there's a bunch about getting into the industry that people wrote in first. We should definitely cover some of that.
Yeah.
How are you doing, Jonathan? Are you
Doing pretty
good?
good. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay. Um,
Here, I'm scrolling up in the chat really quick.
okay. I'm just going to read Danielle's. Did we read Danielle's question? Okay, it's about a good place to start and all these things. She says, I'm a recent graduate. I majored in game design and 3D animation, and I realized I have nothing to show art portfolio wise. This is actually a very common experience
Mm.
with art school. It's one of the reasons that I run an online school because I got so frustrated with all these art schools. I feel you, Danielle. Okay. Even though what I've worked on in college and school related is related, I think meant to say is related, but just not refined, should I still apply for entry level jobs, even though what I have is bad? Um, Along with realizing near the end of my schooling, I've garnered an interest in VFX and math. Ooh, welcome to the dark side of visual effects. Being a key foundation, with wanting to take it seriously, where would be a good place to start? Well, I'm glad you asked. VFX Apprentice. I'm pretty biased, but we have we have the free training in the link and the free 7-day trial. So maybe try that out. Um, do you know any free online mentorships or resources that are available? Thank you. Okay. So yeah, first off, check out the free training. There's no sign up required. You just like log into it and you can try it out. The free 7 days is like the full enchilada of everything. So if you can get through all our content in 7 days, I dare you. It's like 220
It's a
plus
lot.
hours.
It's a lot.
Um, that's mathematically impossible. Okay. Maybe on double
So,
speed, you can get through more, but
maybe. I would chime in here for Danielle because
yeah.
this is actually something I saw a lot. Um, so when we were first starting CG Cookie, we
Yeah.
did we actually interviewed a lot of interns and a couple of employees that we ended up hiring from a nearby art school. And it was very common for them to include their entire portfolio. Basically, every piece they had ever created during school, they included. In this case, for Danielle, she's saying that she doesn't have anything to show, which is probably not actually a bad thing because half of most schooling is just learning how to create things, learning different techniques. And you're not necessarily going to create good work in school,
Yeah.
but also your portfolio, when you think about like what's relevant to an employee, it shouldn't be an all encompassing big thing. No, it should just be a reflection of a couple of your best, most recent things, a reflection of where your skills are today. So if you don't have anything, take a couple of days, create something for yourself, create something that's focused towards the position that you're hiring for,
Yeah.
whether that's VFX, character model, it doesn't matter. Create something that is relevant to the people that you're applying for and create something fresh.
Yeah. So I think one of two things is happening here with Danielle. Either Danielle's being way too hard on herself and she actually does have some decent work. She's saying she has nothing to show for it, which is kind of sounds like all or nothing thinking to me. Like maybe actually you did do a couple of things that are rather brilliant, and you need someone else to judge that for you, to tell you, no, actually, this is pretty good. You're just not seeing it because you know all that's wrong with it, and you need to give yourself a break. Um, or it's the school didn't, to your point, Jonathan, maybe the school didn't adequately prepare her
Hmm.
for creating works on her own time that are her own inspiration, and it's more just like assignments. So like you were told to do the tutorial, you did the tutorial, you were told how to do it, you did it that way, and it doesn't let you show through of
Yeah.
your creativity, your talents, your ability to put all the different things together. So absolutely you need to take time. We're very project focused with how we run our curriculum, and I definitely always think that's important to say. It's results based. Like make something cool that you're proud of, that you're excited to work on. Now work back from that. How do you build to that? How do you create that? So it might be a little bit of both. The thing is, you're asking also like, should I apply even though my portfolio is not great? I mean, I wouldn't look at it as black or white. Again, it's not all or nothing. There's an in between thing called networking. So I would find ways to network with
Mhm.
people who work at studios that you want to work at and get their opinion on where you're at
Yeah.
and what you should do and talk
It's
you
also worth,
through how to improve.
there's the classic advice of, you miss every shot you don't take. And while it's
Yep.
true, I think to your point, Jason, that in the absence of a portfolio that you're able to share,
Mm-hmm.
networking is probably the second most important thing. Um, I mean, maybe it's
Yeah.
even the most important thing.
Because they'll tell you how to
So
fix your portfolio.
mhm. Well, and they'll tell you what they're looking for.
Right.
So often people submit portfolios that have nothing to do with the job that they're applying for,
Exactly.
and it's actually completely unrelated experience. But like, I have a small little microbrewery on the side, and I frequently will hire part-time bartenders or brewers, and not frequently. I'm fortunate to very infrequently hire people for it, but I'll get applications and people are like, "Well, I've spent my life behind a desk, and here's my resume of all my office work that I've done while I'm applying for this very customer-facing bartending position." Like, that's great. That's
Yeah.
not relevant though.
Yeah.
When you're applying for a position, at the end of the day, like showing how you are relevant is half the battle.
Yep.
For one, because you're going to be competing against a whole lot of other people, and you got to get noticed first. Then you can get the interview. And
Yep.
that getting noticed part is, you can either have a super relevant portfolio, or you can have somebody give you an introduction, aka the
Mm,
networking part. So the networking part is key.
I think that's great. Okay, we got a hot and spicy one here,
All right,
John.
let's hear it.
Sounds great. Honestly, I miss seeing the great Jonathan W. in all his glory again. I
Hi,
loved
Sean.
watching him
Great to see
teach
you in the
on
stream.
recordings back in the day at CGC.
I did a bunch of them. I did a bunch of them.
He's moved on, but seeing him join this stream brought me here.
That's awesome.
I'm
That is
glad to
awesome.
bring you back from the dead, from
From
your
the
hiding
dead.
place. Where have you
I've been
been?
I've been
Where
hiding in my
where
coffin.
where have you been? No, but really, like, talk us through like the cycle of like,
Oh man.
yeah, because I did it too. I did a
Yeah.
lot more tutorials in the early days. I do a lot fewer now. I barely do
Mhm.
any at all. So walk us through that. How does that happen?
Well, I mean, I can. The only thing I can do is tell you how it happened for me. Um, so, if we jump back to the early days of CG Cookie, the the really the origin story was that my partner Wes Burke started the site, and he was an environment game artist trying to get out of the industry, trying to do his own thing. He was, burned out and tired of going from job to job to job. And so he started CG Cookie as just an all purpose CG site, had articles, tutorials, interviews, you name it. and he was just trying to get it off the ground. And so he was using his own money, his very, very limited cash flow that he had, because he and his wife were in a pretty tough spot financially. But he was offering to pay people to make tutorials. And I think at the time, this was 2008, 2009. It was like $150 to make a tutorial if it was approved. And I
Hmm.
was a poor college kid, had basically no expenses. I was living in the dorms, and I'd been doing some Blender tutorials for free. So I said, "Oh yeah, I'll take $150 to make a tutorial. Sounds great." So I submitted an idea to him. He accepted it for some reason, and we did it. And then it was fairly well received. And, I don't know what the traffic was at that point in time, but it was pretty low. But it garnered enough interest that it was like, okay, maybe that worked. Let's do another one. And then that one got more interest, and then another one, and another one, and another. And before long, over the course of like 6 months, I think I did probably 20 or 30 tutorials, and 90 plus, maybe 95% of all traffic to the site was for the Blender tutorials. And we had one other Blender instructor that was also doing tutorials, and his were also doing really well. And so I just kept doing them. I think over the next 5 years, I would do upwards of 2,000 some tutorials.
It's a lot of
It was a
content.
lot. Yeah, and they were little tips, long drawn out courses, full on training series, workshops, you name it. So like I don't. One time I tried to figure out how many thousands of hours of video training I did. I I couldn't come up with a number. It was a lot.
I'm
Um,
sure I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have a parasocial relationship with you.
yeah, like literally that was the basis of my entire career actually.
It's
Was
like, "Oh, you're Jonathan," and you're
Yeah.
like, "I don't know you." Like, "I
Yeah.
know you," and it's like, "Oh."
It has happened. I have run into people in coffee
Yeah.
shops and things like that that recognized my voice.
Like, it's kind of a byproduct of what we do, right?
Yeah.
Where I mean, I love meeting somebody who, they'll tell me like, "Wow, like I got my start because of because of you."
Mhm.
And I love that. And I love helping people and
Yeah.
knowing that. I
It's really
wish
fun.
I wish I had more time in my life to get to know all the people.
Yeah. I think it like watching for me, watching somebody that learned from some of my original tutorials go on to be a successful artist it's such a
Yeah.
mixed bag of emotions, like almost all good ones, but there's that little hint like, well, I wanted to be a successful artist, but I didn't choose that path. That's not the way that I went. And it's so
Yeah.
fun though to see when people do. They're like, oh, like actually there's I'm not going to call them out because I don't know if they would want to be called out, but there's one artist in particular who is a full-time professional artist now, just doing their own work in 3D with a combination of 3D, mostly 3D printing. And they were one of my early students back in like 2010, I think.
Hmm.
And it's so cool seeing what they're doing to this day. I'm like, man, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
uh, it's honestly the thing that makes me sometimes want to get back to teaching. Like I haven't taught a course
So
or
why
done a
don't you?
tutorial in.
Back to the question,
uh,
what's keeping you from doing that? I'm such a
oh,
jerk
no, no,
right
no.
now.
I actually
I'm
I
putting you
don't
on the
mind it.
spot.
Put me on the spot. It's fine. Um, some of it's time, some of it's focus, being pulled too many different ways. I mean, you know as well as I do that the nature of running a business is you wear a lot of different hats, and you don't know what you're going to be doing a lot of days. I think, okay,
Yeah.
here's the real answer why I think is that I'm trying to, within my work today, I am trying to figure out how to reclaim my own time so that I can just dedicate chunks of time, whether it's a week or a month, to a particular project. And that's something that I haven't yet figured out how to do, or
Mm,
maybe just haven't chosen to do it. Um, is I get pulled so many different directions, and all
mhm,
for good reasons, but it does not give me the focus time to be able to do something like, for example, teach a course again. I don't have the focus time to teach a course in a way that I would be happy doing it. I would feel like I had just scraped it together and just called it good enough. I don't want to do a good enough course. If I'm going to do a course, I want to do a good course.
I think building on what you're saying, your reasoning is, I think, legitimate, rational reasoning.
And wrong.
Mine is probably uh, a similar version of it, but for me, it's that I do have the time.
Mhm.
I could piece together the hours to create tutorials, to create art more often. The reason I don't is because I really struggle with context switching.
Yeah.
So, like, the hours in the day are there. I could do it, like, logically, if I just blocked out my day and I said, here's where I'm doing meetings, here's where I'm managing the business, here's where I'm doing outreach to studios, doing marketing content, doing whatever, right? And then here's the blocks of time that I'm going to actually create content, whether it's educational or just even
Yeah.
animation content, effects content. The reason I've struggled with this, and I've beat myself over the head repeatedly, frustrated that I'm not doing this, because
Oh,
I'm
I know.
like,
Yeah.
I just struggle with context switching. So the
As in,
momentum I
so let
get,
me see if I can nail that down, because I think we're the same in that way. In that you jump from
yeah,
one thing to another too quickly,
the
and you're
deep
not giving
focus, you
yourself
mentioned
the
this.
window of focus time.
The deep
Yeah.
focus
I
takes time to get into and
I
it takes time
struggle
to
with that a
come out of.
lot. Um, and I
Yeah, it's
think part
really
of it,
hard.
you know, I think the thing that makes it hard for me, it's not that I can't do that. You know, for my side, I'm very fortunate. I've got a great team working on the team, working
Yep.
on the business. I I have the autonomy. I can choose to say, no, this 6 hour chunk of time, I'm not talking to anybody. I'm just doing it. And I think where I regularly fail to actually like give myself that focus time is that I'm just too interested in doing too many different things. I love dabbling. I love jumping into the customer side. I love jumping into the development side. I love jumping into the architectural design of the business. Like, I love exploring new tools. Like, heck, I was, before we got on the stream, I was playing around with Riverside, the tool that we're using today for streaming, and thinking, man, this makes me want to get back into our podcast again. This would be so much easier. I'm like, wait,
I love
I
Riverside.
don't.
They're not a
It's
sponsor, but
it's a
they're
really great
actually
tool.
really good.
uh, so yeah, no, you nailed it. That context switching is why I don't make another course.
Well, and then as you get
The
older, you
other
have
the other part of
kids,
it,
and then you have
yeah,
other responsibilities outside of work. And
I guess the other part of it is that I don't do enough Blender work. Like, if I were to make a course today, it would not be on Blender. It would be on something adjacent to Blender.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Uh,
I got to say this. I know how lame all this sounds, by the way. People are like, "Oh, poor Jason. He's got all these great things in his life, and why can't he just?" And I'm like, believe me, I have told myself the same
uh,
thing. If anyone out there is critical of me,
oh
I
my
have
god.
been more critical of me. That, like, why can't you just? And I'm trying to do better, to be kind to myself and say, you know what? Maybe you could do better. This is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, not even you're doing your best, because that implies that, like, there's a scale. It's like, it's just, again, it goes back to that inner acceptance, that it's like I'm that same kid sitting in that studio sweating, that, like, why am I here? How am I qualified to do this? Am I good enough? I don't know. Like, it's the same basic thing that I'm trying to let go of, that's saying, why aren't you doing more? You have more time in the day. Why aren't you filling those hours? Like, it's just,
It's what.
I have
Yeah.
the brain that I have,
Mhm,
and I have the body that I have, and I'm one human being,
mhm.
and I'm doing what I'm doing. I could be doing something different. I could be doing what I'm currently doing differently, but
It's also a good example of how
I don't
we
know.
so often are our own worst critic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
You know, it's so easy to compare yourself to other people and then just feel like a fraud because you haven't done this thing or that thing. And um,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, we're getting some validation. I appreciate the
it
validation in the chat. Like making tutorials is very demanding.
is.
I make them too, and it's a
Oh,
lot of work. Yeah,
uh,
I say this to people. It's so funny. I'll be like, are you worried about competition? I'm like, let them try. If someone wants to build a game effects school to compete with us, they are welcome to do it. It's been so hard. And if they have an easy time
yeah.
with it, I guess I just wasn't cut out for
What?
this.
Okay, so here let's change tact.
Okay.
You've built that VFX school.
Yeah. With help.
You've
A
been
lot of help. It
absolutely.
wasn't just me, but
No, no,
yes.
no. I'd say you in a broad sense. Um,
Yeah.
uh, what was the hardest part over the last 5 years
Oh, that's a good question.
in the
They
con?
say
Like,
that you
yeah,
can't always pick everything you want, but you can pick the pain. You can pick your suffering. Um, what's been the hardest part about the process of building the school? I think it's, you mentioned this, it's that you want to do everything, and effects covers so much. It covers a broad scope of things, and I've tried to do it all. I
yeah.
think that's been hard. I think figuring out who to listen to and who to tune out has been very hard as well. I
What's
think
helped
I've
you?
made a lot of mistakes because I listened to the wrong people. And I
How
was
did
always
how did
worried
you
that would
make that
happen, and then it
realization
did.
after the fact, though? You know, like
What's
what?
that?
How did you make that realization after the fact? And what? How do you
Yeah.
now decide who to listen to?
I'm I'm learning to listen to myself better. I'm learning to trust myself better. My instincts have always been the one thing I pride myself on is I have really, really good instincts. And I think probably most of the worst mistakes I've made in my life was because I just didn't I listened to someone else when if I had the and I don't fault myself because like, you know, I mean, I got a lot of noise going on. I but if I listened to myself, if I had had the wherewithal to listen to the inner wisdom that I held and the intuition and the courage to like actually just do it, even though I was totally unqualified by all written standards, I would be better off, honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
I've lost a lot of money taking some really bad advice, and I wasted a lot of time, and I've damaged relationships, and none of it was my advice. It was other people's advice.
Well, it's kind of the you've got to go with what you know.
Yeah, and that's the
Even
thing.
if that doesn't follow like
It's
the
a
best advice from whoever, like you can only do what you know.
and it's a chicken and egg thing, right? Like it's easy to say now, but like honestly, like I remember like I was about to do certain things. Like, I don't know. I feel like maybe I should. And someone else would be like, no, man, this is the thing. I'm like, okay. But then I'm like, no, I had it right. I should have done the thing that I was, t- trepidly, insecurely hypothesizing might work, maybe, but I wasn't confident enough to just say, screw it. I mean,
All
I would
right.
say F it,
So
but I
so
don't want to
with
get
that in mind though,
demonetized. But yeah.
Blanche SB Sean um uh mentioned in chat, that some lessons come from taking risk though. So what was something that you did with VFX Apprentice
Mhm.
that you didn't think was going to work out, or like you were really unsure it was too risky, but you went for it? That proved to be the right choice.
Quitting my job.
Yeah.
I mean, that's everything,
Did
right?
which came first, VFX Apprentice or quitting your job?
VFX Apprentice. We had when I quit, it was somewhere between 3 and 6 months of expenses saved up. So if the
That's
business
not a very
stopped
big
making money
timeline.
the day I quit, I could have
Yeah.
survived for 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And I was like talking with my friend who was a business owner, and he's like, just quit. You'll be so glad you did in 6 months. I promise you. You'll be so glad you quit. And I was like, I really like my job. It's a great job. I love it. I love the people there. I love what we're working on. He's like, yeah, but do you love your business more? And I was like, yeah, I do. He's like, yeah, then quit. Why is this a question? That's one guy I'm glad I listened to, incidentally. But yeah, so that's the big one. That's the obvious one. As far as like decisions within the business, I don't know. That's a really good question. Yeah, some good questions. Probably something like, you know, I really invested heavily in the content and just like let's make some really killer content, some things that people are gonna love, and let's make it awesome. And there was one crazy idea I had that it was like we're gonna build the whole environment and a character that's rigged so that people can actually like have a game to play their effects in as students, and we own it so we can redistribute it to students and include it in the promotions. The students will include it in their demo reels. When you saw the demo reel playing earlier, a lot of those shots were in that environment with that character. And I don't know, like it cost a lot of money and took a lot of time to build all that. But and a lot of students, I don't think students fully realize why that's valuable, because they're like, why can't I just do this on a ball and do my effects? But studios love it. The studios think it's an amazing thing that our students actually work in a game with game hookups on a character in an environment that has
Yeah.
a style, that has lighting.
It shows context. That's what they're
Yeah,
going to be
like it
asking the
shows.
person to do.
Yeah, so all the studios I talk to and people at studios love it. Incoming students take it for granted. They don't realize that it was like a massive investment to build it. But I don't know. We're still building foundational pieces off of it, and so I'm really glad that I took that risk and did something unconventional for a school.
Yeah.
Usually, you wouldn't see a school doing that, but um, I think I wish I did more stuff like that. See, that's the thing is I'm like now I'm recognizing like why
What's
am
stopping
I
you?
like how am I not just doing what I want to do by now? Why am I listening to anyone else but my own gut? Like that's crazy. I mean, there's sometimes it's good to listen to others. Like I should be listening to my wife. I should be.
Well, that's a
There's
good
some
one to
people
listen
you
to.
should listen to, but like, oh man. Anyway,
I still think it's very cool what you've built, and just one of the things that I've really liked as we've gotten to know each other, and comparing our own businesses and where the commonalities are and where they're different. One of the key things that actually we have a shared thing, which is both on the education side, both the businesses are very focused. Yours is
mm,
very focused on the VFX. Mine is very focused on the Blender side. But one of the things I've always liked with what you've done is how everything from the content to the marketing material, you name it, like it all works because it's all VFX. It's all visual.
mm,
There's a continuity in the work that you all have done that is really hard to do. And I don't know. I suppose on one hand, maybe that makes your potential audience smaller, but it also makes it a lot more direct. And
yeah. And I've looked at ways to broaden the audience. I mean, of course, I would look at that. Like, can we expand into other things? Can we look at the greater game development pipeline? And it's something I'm still exploring and interested in, but I don't think we're done with effects. So I have to make sure that if I'm going to expand, I have to still serve the current audience well,
mhm.
right?
What's the average tenure of a student for VFX Apprentice?
Oh, they come and go. Our
Sure.
model, we have a few different models. So the one is subscription. So what we see there is, people will sign on, they'll stay for however long they need to like get the bulk of what they need. They might get their first job out of that or whatever, but then and then they'll like unsubscribe, but then they'll come back
Mhm.
later as professionals. They'll get their studio to pay for it or something like that, and they'll come back and they'll be like, "Hey, it's good to be back." So we see all different kinds. The content spans the full spectrum of beginner to advanced. So then there's the classes. So those run for like 4 to 8 weeks, and depending on the class format, and then they'll come in for that. They might go into the next one. They might take a break for a while. Some people are working with us as professionals. They're learning continued education. Other people are, fresh out of school and on a limited budget. So it just really varies based on. How about you? Are your people dipping in and out,
They
coming and
do.
going?
So ours is all monthly membership, well, monthly or annual memberships.
Hmm.
Um, so the average the time to churn on the business side, is it's right about 3 months for the average
Hmm.
student. But then if you start breaking, if you get rid of has such a negative connotation. I don't mean it that way.
For
If you get rid of all
statistics,
these students, no, I mean
the
if you
statistics, not the people.
yes,
Yes.
yes, statistically, if you separate out the different groups of students, we've got students that have been with us for 10 years, not because they need to, but because they want to be. We
Yeah.
actually, I went back and looked. I think we still have some original members who, when we first launched the membership, it was called CG Cookie Citizen, and it was $10 a month. And I think some of those members are still active. Um,
Yep.
and we
We get
we
the
we
old
have
timers.
we
We
have
have that
lifetime
too.
memberships that we open up about once a year, and so those then of course are permanent. But some of those long term members that still supporting it from day one, and part of me is like, are you are you there just because you didn't want to pass up the discount now, or are you still actively learning and engaged? Like, and
Yeah.
ultimately it's all the above. Um,
This is so true. Like totally same thing. Our average I think is quite similar, but it's not representative of like what I'm seeing
mhm,
because there's the familiar faces and the community. The Discord community is like the stickiest thing for us. So like when people get an annual pass or one of the classes, they get permanent Discord access. So they may not have the subscription to the content, but they may still be able to like hang out with us and get the feedback in the channels and like
yeah,
see what other people are doing and come to the live sessions every week. And I love that crowd.
yeah.
The community on there is really a testament to what Benedict and the other mentors have built, which is like again, it's totally focused on
Mhm.
the individual.
There's something that I've really come to value about the education communities. We see this on CG Cookie,
Yeah,
and everything that you've told me seems to mirror that, which is that education-based communities are just so wholesome
they
in so many ways,
are.
so very
Wholesome, such a
supportive.
good word. I love that word.
Yeah, and propping people up, helping each other, like just the all of the things that you just can't help but want in a community just seem to come naturally. And that's not always been the case in other communities. And I mean, without being critical, without being putting them on the spot, because they're part of our community too, is like the super hive community on the marketplace is so much more complicated.
Mm,
And there's just something pure about the education side. It's so supportive, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Just
I mean, there was one time I was just like chilling out on one of the Discord channels, just the voice channels.
Mhm.
It's like I'm just gonna sit in here and get some work done. If people come in, I'll say hi. And pretty soon we had a little group, and we're like, "You want to go offline to another Discord server and we'll just play some mini golf. Discord has this mini golf game that's so fun. And we're like, heck yeah. And so we all just went and played around a mini golf on another. I mean, I try to keep it somewhat separate because it's like it's a learning environment. We don't want to be like too crazy and social all the time. But like it's kind of like when you're at college, there's the experience on campus and then there's the experience in the dorms. And they're two very different environments.
Hmm.
um, so yeah, anyway, I think community's critical to
No,
have
I
a
think it's in many ways it's the only thing that matters.
yeah.
In the context of the just like finding that connection and the long
And I get
term
it too. Like,
viability and
people leave us, they go get a job at a studio, and that's their community. That should
Mhm.
be their community, and they leave us for a while, but then they may come back later on. Like, there's always a fondness there.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
good. Speaking of leaving, I think we might be coming to the end of our time.
My stomach is telling me that it is about that time.
It's-
It's
Listen to
dinner
your gut.
time.
Hey.
uh, no, this has been a lot of fun though.
Okay.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
Sorry for yelling into the microphone, everyone. But yeah, no, this is great.
Yeah.
I love seeing everyone here. If you asked a question and we didn't get to, I sincerely apologize. Please reach out. You can get a hold of me on LinkedIn. You can get a hold of me other ways. I don't know. Stalk me all you want. I don't mind. Reach
Same.
out, ask me
Very
questions.
public. Very public
Yes,
with the absence of social media. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at, Jonathan at Autotroph, Jonathan at CG Cookie, Jonathan at Blender Market. Any one of them. As long as you remember one of the brands, they all work. They all go to me.
that's
Uh,
right.
um, but no, I'm not on social media anymore, and I'm quite enjoying that.
That must be nice.
It's great. I highly recommend it.
Highly
Highly,
recommend.
highly recommend it.
So
Uh,
does
yeah.
science.
Oh,
Science
actually,
backs you up on that one.
if I may interject with it,
Yeah,
because
go ahead.
Blanche just asked a question in chat, which is, are you all going to be at Texas Beacon next year? If you don't mind, we giving
Oh,
a self promo.
let's do all the promos. Yes,
Yeah.
please. Promote Beacon.
Autotroph is hosting Blender Conference North America round 2. So we hosted the first one in Los Angeles last year for 2024. And then next year in April in Austin, Texas, your home turf, we are hosting the second North American official Blender conference, and so that will be April. I should have the dates. Anyway, it's like the first 2 weeks of April. It is going to be a middle of the week conference, just because of trying to get the venue. We couldn't getting the venue booked for a weekend was particularly difficult. It's going to be
Hmm.
it's a really cool venue. It's called In Cahoots or In Cahoots. So it's not going to be a normal conference hall. It'll be cool. So I know some people were in the stream. We're at the LA conference. We're going to try and recreate it again. So definitely
I'll be
come check it
there.
out. Early bird tickets are available. And then there's going to be a lot more information coming very soon on like, the whole schedule and timing and all that kind of stuff.
That is a
But
30-minute drive for me.
it's a lot longer than that for me. Yes, April 13th and 14th. Thank you, Amber. If
Let's
anybody
hang
doesn't know,
out at Beacon.
Amber in the chat is Amber Kelly. She is the Director of Community and Support for Autotroph. She is amazing.
She's
Thank
your
you, Amber.
plant.
Yeah, she's my plant. I didn't know she was going to be here.
I love it. No, I love seeing that. That's great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Beacon's going to be great. I'm going to be at GDC in
Mhm.
March. It's on
Yes.
March 9th this year in San Francisco. It's always
Mhm.
in San Francisco. I'll be doing I put in my submission for the roundtables. I haven't gotten official approval yet,
Mhm.
but I've done the roundtables for the past, I don't know how many years, 5+ years. So that's the thing that I love to do every year. And then we'll have a guest um, presenter on the third day of the roundtables for VFX.
Nice.
And then
Are you going to SIGGRAPH?
not this time.
Nice. Well,
I need to make it out there though.
at GDC, I think we're gonna be there. I'm not going to, but I think some of the team is gonna be there, so they know they're go say hi to you.
I love GDC. So beginning of the week at GDC, we always have the VFX Summit, which is a day of VFX talks.
Mhm.
And then there's the VFX roundtables, which is 1 hour for 3 different days. in
Nice.
the latter part of the week. So for the full VFX experience, it's like basically Monday through Friday. It's a lot of
That's an
commitment, I
intense
know,
week.
but we have yeah, it's a big week. We also have a VFX party every year at the beginning of the week as well, where VFX Apprentice is a sponsor. We get other VFX related organizations to sponsor. Free drinks, fun time. It's a good time to mingle and network and
Cool.
hang out. And you don't even need a conference pass for the party. So,
Hey, there you go.
but yeah, we'll hang out. We'll meet up in person. If anyone's here
Absolutely.
that
Well, I'm
wants
still
to
gonna I'm gonna
hit me
drag
up,
you to Beacon. So
yeah, drag
I'm
me
pretty sure
over.
that you're already on the schedule to give a talk, whether you know it or not.
Okay, I'll whip something up. I'll put something together.
uh,
Oh
oh,
gosh.
awesome. Well,
Well,
Jason,
good times.
yeah, thank you so much. This was a blast, and thank you everybody in the was watching and hung out with us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Y'all are amazing. Thanks for
We should
being here.
we
We'll
should do
see you
this more
around.
often.
Bye.
See ya.